This is the Harmonic Motion Podcast, a place where you, dear listener, can join with automotive aftermarket professionals as they delve into and discuss the matters which matter.
Hello and welcome to another thrilling episode of the Technical Synchromesh Harmonic Motion Podcast. I'm joined today by a group of budding garage owners and master technicians, and we're going to talk about, well, all sorts of stuff. So buckle in, strap in, do whatever else you need to do to listen. And so I'd like to welcome our guest panel this evening, and we're going to start with Mark.
My name's Mark. I own a garage in Taunton, Abacus Vehicle Services.
What are you doing here, Mark? What draws you to TTHQ?
So we're here for our Master Technician Reaccreditation. It's been 2 years since we passed originally, so we're just going through the motions of ticking that box.
Doing the reaccreditation, yeah, cool stuff. And how did you find the assessments? Because you've been under the cosh today, so it's a bit unfair of me to drag you in and then try and get you to talk about other things. But how did you get on today with the assessments?
I think everything went to plan.
Good.
Yeah.
No ambulances and no fire engines is generally a good sign of a good day,
yeah.
And that nobody fainted or passed out. And I think we passed that, Mark. So
yeah.
Cool stuff. Great. Thanks, Mark. And so next up, we have Mick.
Hi there, Michael Shakeley, owner of a garage in Colchester, Shakeley Motor Company. Up here with these great guys that we've become a kind of a little community within ourselves on the back of our original Master Technician training. And we're up here having some fun, helping each other out. It's been really good.
Yeah, good stuff. I think you need now, Mick, in your introduction to say award-winning. So I know how shy you are about that, but we're coming on the back of the blend, aren't we? Just a week or so ago. Yeah. So you've got another shiny trophy for your cabinet, haven't you?
We have indeed.
Hearty congratulations, formally.
Thank you.
Well done. Awesome stuff. Thanks for that. Okay, next up.
Name's Josh Hopkins. Work for a garage, Tivoli Auto Services down in Hastings. Here for Master Tech Reaccreditation. Not as many awards as Mick, none at all really.
But working on it.
But yeah, it's just nice rubbing shoulders with him.
Have you got his autograph? That's the thing.
It was a photo he gave me. He gave me a nice autograph.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. Oh, that's pretty
in
cool.
Your wallet. Yeah, it's in my wallet.
Oh, great stuff. Okay, thanks for that, Josh. Okay.
My name's Mike Bell, and I own a garage in Dorchester called Adam's Garage. I'm here with the other chaps we met a few years ago, do our Master Tech training for a reaccreditation.
Yeah, awesome. How'd you get on today, Mike?
Today went okay. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, good. It went okay. That's good. Yeah, after a tough day of assessment, that's probably a good sum up. And it went okay.
Yeah,
we survived. Yeah, no, good stuff. Cool. And then last but not least.
Hi, my name's Dan. I'm from Worthing. I own a garage called Mac Autos. And yeah, I'm just here today to re-accredit my Master Technician.
Yeah, awesome. And how did you get on, Dan?
Really well.
All go to plan?
Yeah, all went to plan, yeah.
Good stuff. There's nothing like... Go on, I says there's nothing like a guy stood with a clipboard while you're doing your funky magic, is it, to add the pressure?
It's stressful.
Yeah. It is. It's a bit unreal world, but I suppose in a way it's the only way that the standard which we're all applying to has to be maintained. So the IMI set that standard, and it's a bit like an MOT, I suppose, for your skills. That there's an inspector that watching you do your funky stuff. But so well done for getting through today. Yeah, it's no mean feat. I mean, I sweat cobs. And I know all the ins and outs. When I do mine, I do get myself under a bit of pressure. Can do the task stood on your head, but it's just that formal assessment thing's a little bit. Yeah. So the guys are also empathetic because they go through it. So they sort of know your position. They've been there themselves. So hopefully they do their best to disappear into the background and not be such a daunting spectre on the horizon. So no, congratulations all, and well done. And also thanks for agreeing to appear on the podcast after such a tough day. Do appreciate it. We've bribed you with pizza, so looking forward to a good chat. a few burps, but maybe a good chat. Cool stuff. Now, Mark, I'm going to come to you. I put you in the hot seat almost without you knowing, so that means I come to you first for the introductions, and then you get the joy to answer the first question. So, to get the conversation going, because I know you guys have got good and sturdy views about all sorts of stuff across the industry, I'm going to come to you with the first question, and the other guys feel free to chip in. But I'm going to go around the table with it. What's the most common mistake you see in garage operations? It might be your own, might be others, that you think are kind of avoidable, but you see and you might roll your eyes a little bit and go, oh, it could be fixed. It is so easy to do that. What sort of things do you think garages, maybe your garage, our garage, the garages that you deal with, could do a bit better in? Anything that springs to mind?
I think communication.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, definitely in our place. We all have our own problems day to day.
Yeah.
I need to be better at realising my staff's problems.
Yeah.
And I think communication is the biggest one.
Yeah. It's very easy to I think it's very easy to feel that you're over communicating. So how much reporting is too much reporting? And actually from the client's perspective, you maybe haven't communicated enough. So I always think of that perspective of my view about over communication could be seen as a distinct amount of under communication on the other side, especially if I'm busy and it's all going off. We've let them know, we've sent a message or whatever. We think they're in the picture. And we haven't maybe succeeded in that. Yeah, that's a really good one, communication. And I think the problem with a communication issue is you don't know there's been a problem sometimes until after the event, when you maybe get the feedback and it becomes obvious that, so I guess wouldn't it be great to try and get that closed loop during the process? How do you know you've under communicated? It's real tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think the ultimate customer review at the end of the whole event could pick you up on communication, where if there's a way of being able to solve it. Now, I know some of the systems that you've got in place at your place, particularly I suppose with garage management, can help with some of that communication by maybe automating it or including it as part of the process. Do you find that's helpful?
It's helpful, yes. But I think that there still needs to be the human touch in there.
Completely.
So the automated's great, but we're a little sort of town. We're not in these big cities yet. No. So for us, it's a little bit different. We need that human touch.
And do you think that's a phone call, or is that a text, or
I think it's a combination of all of that. I don't think you can just rely on one.
No.
I think it needs to be all of that.
Yeah, no, very true. And we, in some of the training that we run for front of house, we give a tip often that you can tell the way a client might want to be communicated if you look at the way they communicated with you firstly. So if they've sent you an email and you're trying to phone them, they may be an email preference.
Yeah.
If they send you a text and you're trying to email them, hang on a minute, you may be using the wrong medium. Now, it's not foolproof, but you can often get an indication of how you prefer to communicate. So if I was going somewhere and I was going to book a restaurant, I would send an email. Have you got a table for Sunday for 2 at 7 o'clock? And if they tried to ring me, it wouldn't get through because I never answer my phone because I'm a communicator of email. And if they sent a text, I probably wouldn't see that till the morning going, oh, they got back to me. So it's really interesting in the analysis work that I've done of my own preferences and those of people that we deal with. It's funny that how they communicate with you can be their desired preference. It might be they were busy and they just texted you, but it's really interesting. How do you work out, unless they, you're almost going with a check sheet. What is your preferred style of communication, Mr. Client? I don't know, just talk to me. But it's tricky, isn't it? Yeah, but true enough. I think the personal touch is again pretty nifty. But what medium is probably the one that we might get wrong. Yeah, cool stuff. Thanks, Mark. Nick, come to you. What do you think?
I think on the lines of communication there is the biggest problems we sometimes have is we're dealing with a complex car and a complex problem. And unless the communication's really spot on and you're engaging the customer in the repair, then you don't get a positive outcome at the end because you haven't communicated properly what you need to do and what the charges are going to be and what the potential outcome of several tests are going to be. So we try and, as much as we possibly can, engage the customer at the beginning and try and sort of highlight a journey that you could end up at this horrible point here, and if we end up there, are you going to be happy? And then hopefully, we do have jobs that end up there, and they come, they expect it, rather than trying to just sort of say bring it down quickly and we'll have a quick look at it, and you're already sort of giving them a false sense of security. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Really, it does make sense. I think one of the things that springs to mind there is the mantra of no surprises. So if they're on a journey with a complex repair, as you say, and you're letting them know potentially the size of the problem and or the size of the solution, that if it goes that way, we're kind of expecting it, or it wasn't a complete surprise. And that, I suppose, is the difficulty, as Mark sort of alluded to. How do you communicate that in a way that's not scaring them off, but in a way that's informing them and giving them options along the way, that they can stop at any moment, that it might go this way, and if it does, what are your thoughts? So it's a tricky one, isn't it? Especially with complex repairs where you don't know the outcome. If you've got a car in for a clutch, what's the worst? Well, it might spring to being a dual mass clutch and flywheel. It might have damaged the casing in the transmission. It might need a rear main oil seal as well. But your scope of expansion is sort of limited to a cluster of things that are related. But if you go diag, cars intermittently misfiring once in a blue moon, or it's not starting, your extent of the repair could be very small or very big.
Absolutely, but that's all in the preparation, isn't it? So with we do lots of things like wet belts, clutches, that type of thing is prominent in our workshop. But if we're saying to someone, it needs a 2-piece clutch kit and then the box is out and it needs a flywheel, then delivering that news is difficult. And sometimes, because you haven't prepared the customer for it, you're going to do some kind of sacrifice there. So you might supply the flywheel at cost, or no additional labour. So it's all about that preparation before you start the job. So I kind of like a bit of a risk assessment on every job. So we've got if we've been caught out like that before, then we've got to make sure we don't do it the next time. Because that just ends up in an awkward situation with the customer. Yeah,
you end up trying to rescue a relationship rather than build a strong one. You kind of behind the curve. Is there? And this is one thing that springs to mind as I deal with other things in other aspects of my life. I try and reflect them back to the way I would deal with the people about their car. Is there any other services that you have in your life that kind of have the complexity in them that we have with the motor car, that you're dealing with a tradesperson, and how do they manage their communications with you? If you've had building work done, or if you're dealing with an architect or surveyor, or some other thing, are there lessons to learn from other trades, or are we in a bit of a unique position here that it's quite complex and it's quite time demanding because they want their car back and it all happens a bit quick and it can all expand? Are there any are there allied trades that you've dealt with that manage the same kind of relationship with clients?
Well, I think the only other ones really, electricians and plumbers. Your hot water goes off and you've got a fail safe, haven't you? You can put your hot water tank on if you're lucky enough, light a fire or whatever it is. Electricians, I've experienced that. Fuse blows or the trip keeps going off, and it was when it was raining, and then you disconnect this, that and the other. So, but I think with cars, it's people are so reliant on them. They've got kids to pick up. They've got to get to work. I can never truly understand how they must feel, because if something goes wrong for us, 9 times out of 10 we've got somebody else's car or another car that we can use. So I think it must be quite anxious, but people must feel really anxious when their car goes in, and liken it to other trades, I don't know really. It's sort of, other than an electrician, you've got no lights and that's it, nothing works. It's you have a power cut, it's the end of the world, isn't it?
Can be. The internet goes off. Yeah. It's very interesting. Good stuff. Thanks for that, Mick. Josh, what are your views? What stuff do you come across, have you experienced that stuff you see repeating in garages or with garage operations that you think could be tweaked or adjusted or maybe done better? Maybe your own personal experience or stuff you see with other garages?
I think one is starting a new process and seeing the growing pains as the process not working, and then putting a stop onto it right there and then because the process doesn't work.
Yeah.
When really it just needs ironing out. It's always going to be not running smoothly.
Yeah.
When starting something new like that.
Yeah.
And accepting that it just needs to be ironed out, but usually it just gets completely scrapped as that doesn't work.
Yeah, no, good point. So a lot of processes come about from, a process correction is, we've always done it this way. Now it's not working because either the type of car has changed or the type of relationship we got with our customers changed. Yeah, thinking about a new process, quite a difficult subject to. There is a thing called business process re-engineering, big long word, but what you do is you analyze from A to B and you work out where it's fallen down. You find that as your pinch point and you re-engineer just that bit of the process. So a bit like the communication that Mark was saying, that if you're getting bad reviews for the way you communicate, was that communication at the beginning part of the job, at the middle part of the job, or at the end of the job? You find out where it went wrong and then you tweak that process. So yeah, there is I suppose a technique of adjusting processes, but yeah, it's difficult under the muck and bullets of operating daily that you're going to re-engineer the process and try and implement it and get everyone coached in the way we're doing it new and expect it to go wrong and it's quite tricky. Yeah. And you end up, I think a lot of places that are busy go to the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and then it's back to the same old. Yeah, definitely.
And maybe not the best way of doing it, but the least worst.
Yeah.
So it's almost on its head.
The way that I don't have to think about it as much.
Yeah, it doesn't. It annoys the fewest people and costs the least amount of money and takes the shortest amount of time. Yeah, and it's tricky. I think that's part of the sophistication of being in business. That there's some stuff that we when we repair a car think it happens A, B, and C, but actually, there are in bigger businesses they have things called standard operating procedures. So somebody sat with a pen and paper and mapped out how the business works and tweaked and adjusted it, wrote a procedure, and when you start your new job, they run you through all the way everything works that you do. And you sign on it, say, right, okay, I'm cool with that. And if you get stuck, you go to the manual and you call out Z. Okay, for zebras that have got escaped in the workshop, what I should do is call 999, call the fire brigade. But there's a process for it. Yeah. But generally, in a smaller business, there is nobody to do that. And what can happen is you evolve a way of working that sort of kind of works. But changing it can be a nightmare because you've got everyone in the habit. They've always done it that way. And I know if you've ever tried to change a process, I'm kind of looking at Mick, but not looking at Mick. If you implement a new way of doing something, actually the most difficult part generally is bringing the people that are doing that process from the old way to thinking about doing it in the new way. And that's actually, it can't happen tomorrow. That's an evolution over a period of weeks where you've almost got to give it time for everyone to come on board. You've got to expect mistakes and people fail, and then you've got to go through the reasons why it didn't work again and tweak it. It's quite long and drawn out processes, But no, it's a great, and that's why people don't do it. They stick with the way of doing it. Yeah. Doing it properly is actually quite a challenge. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks for that, Josh. Right, Mike, what do you reckon? Stuff you see or stuff you experience?
As far as a communication concerned, I think within the business we struggle sometimes getting staff communicating correctly with like fault sheets on cars and how that's transferred into the office and how that's all dealt with, and sometimes like grievances between us as like sort of managers of the business and the staff. And sometimes we've a meeting on a Wednesday at 2:00 where we all have a chat about, and everyone airs their graces, and you can put your concerns forward, they can put their concerns forward, sometimes clears the air. And
it's a good shout. So regular team meetings.
We don't do it too often, but I think that's a thing for us for a future, to implement team meetings to give everyone a chance to air their concerns and talk about it.
That's a good shout. Having that forum where people can get their voices heard in a way, because I think that sometimes, as a team member myself of various businesses along the way, if you feel you're not being listened to, or you feel, like Josh was saying there, if you understand as an operator that the process is going a bit wonky, but you know it's not worth mentioning because it's going nowhere, you sort of live with that frustration. And I think on your goodwillometer as an employee, if you're living with bad processes and not being listened to, you're getting a little minus in the column, and you're going, I'm feeling a bit of less love for this job than I was before. And you said that communication can change the perspective, because right, I can hear you, we understand that it's not going well.
Yeah.
We can't do anything about it today or tomorrow or next week, but we flag it as an issue and we'll deal with it. I think the communication helps that it prevents the erosion of goodwill in team members, I think, just by being able to have that forum to call it out. And I think in most businesses, then, it comes down to prioritization. So if there are some things wrong, there are some big things with a big impact that need changing, and there are small things with a small impact that need changing. You can have one big thing which is pretty negative, or you could have 150 small things which are more negative. It's kind of prioritizing how you deal with those, and unless you know about them and come up with a bit of a plan of attack to solve them, it can almost go undealt with because it seems to be too big. But you're right, that plan of communication, flagging the issues and making a plan to solve them is can help, because people, we all want our voice, don't we? We all want to be listened to.
Yeah, try and make it more of a positive way of doing things.
Positive change for positive. Yeah, positive change really is the way. If something's if you're not happy about something, the way it's working, and generally everyone can see it, but nobody thinks it's their job necessarily to mention it. So we in those team meetings, I've been in them before, where somebody mentions something else, somebody else, yeah, you're right, and then all of a sudden 25 people go, yeah, that's exactly right, and it's sort of everyone's accepted it's not going to be changed until you have that conversation. So I think that positive communication about things that are going awesomely, as well as stuff that isn't going quite so well, are brilliant. They're part of that highly performing teams. Yeah, communication. Yeah, and an open and honest, environment to do it in. So that's a nifty one. Dan, what do you reckon?
I think workshop organisation's quite a big one.
Yeah.
Workload organisation, knowing what cars are coming in and what jobs are expecting from those, and MOTs, and what could possibly go wrong, and and if you've got we've only got a few members of staff, so if anyone's off for any reason, or it can just sort of throw the whole process out.
The operation can grind. Yeah, I think that
fail miserably.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I think that's one of the challenges in running a workshop where you're taking vehicles in for set problems and descriptions, and when you do your inspection, you find, okay, especially if it's a car you don't know necessarily, if you're dealing with repeat clients who you're doing service and maintenance for, the exceptions are lower, aren't they? Because you're looking after that car, you've done a previous MOT, you've got service history, they're having it well maintained. Where you're getting new clients necessarily with a car you've never seen, and it's in for an MOT, and all of a sudden it spits out, 8 hours of work. And they want it done now because it's failed and it's on your ramp and it's at a prohibition, it's not safe to drive. And now the cost is on you, isn't it, to fix that, to not disappoint the client. So there's a bit of that customer selection there. But work flow and scheduling is one of the big issues. And I guess I'm looking back to Mark there about the garage management systems that we've got that can help with some of that. They can sort of help with the loading and the scheduling, can't they? If they know your resource capability, you can kind of work out what spare capacity you've got.
I think workshop loading's a thankless job. You're never going to get it right.
No.
You can have whatever system you want, and something will come along to change what's going to happen that day.
It probably is the most moving feasts of moving feasts, isn't it?
Yeah. It makes a difference to prepare, but you need to be prepared
for the unprepared,
to change it as well. Yeah.
And you have to be quite brave as well, don't you, when you are changing things? Yeah. It's sometimes we're always thinking, they're boxes that need filling because they're hours that need selling. So we would just want to fill those boxes as quickly as possible. And then we've got that comfort thing that we're busy next week. It's Tuesday this week and we're fully booked up next week. But unless you're brave and you sort of halve that workflow or half the amount of boxes that you fill, that gives you a bit of room then for the odd guy that's off, or the the 8 hours extra work that's just come from an MOT or something. But it's difficult because you just want to fill the boxes up so you know you're full.
Yeah. So. It's that balance, isn't it, between utilisation of selling all of your available time and then being overutilised if you have a mistake, and then not putting too much contingency in, so you've got gaps. It's a really difficult balancing act, isn't it? I know one of the garages I worked in had 2 workshop control that were managing the guys. There were 9 or 10 of us in that garage, but it was a completely thankless nightmare of a job. And of course, people aren't happy if they don't. If your team is built up with people that like to do cam belts and clutches and mechanical stuff, and you've got guys that like to do the electro diag and transmission rebuilds, whatever it is, and you try and give the wrong guy the wrong job. So I got my mechanical guy, now you've got to do a diag. Why? Because the diag guy's buried in diag and you've got nothing to do. That allocation of resources to staff members also adds to the mix of not all technicians like to do all jobs, and some have got a preference, haven't they? And that sort of adds to the mix that the boxes you talk about, the hours available, are kind of different flavoured hours, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And that adds to that nightmare of, as Dan said, then trying to juggle that work, that there's a load of stuff that your superstar technician's going to be grumpy if he's going to be asked to weld a sill on an old Fiesta, and he wants to get on his scope. Yeah, it's really tricky, and I think it is the most thankless task. And looking at garage management systems, I see a few that do it, that kind of allocate the boxes and the hours, but it is that whole, you've made a jigsaw, you've got to unmake the jigsaw, take 2 pieces out and remake it, and not affect the puzzle, the layout. It's a real tricky job. I think that workshop scheduling and loading, it is tricky. And of course the implications are, if you get it wrong, well, no profit this week. No, we did it wrong, we got it wrong. And same as you're saying there, with the communication, if you get that wrong, you're kind of giving away parts at cost and you're mitigating your labour spend. So catastrophe in the workshop loading can end up with annoyed clients that you're doing a favour for, which end up hurting your bottom line. So getting it right has big implications, doesn't it? Communication being correct, workshop loading being correct, adding that sort of contingency into the plan. And I often think about project jobs. So places I've worked at before have project jobs, so if it does go a bit skinny, so you've put a contingency in the diary and that MOT sailed through, there's no extra work and you're looking a bit thin, is roll over to the project job and put some hours in that. But again, that in itself can be a nightmare, because the project jobs that are no rush, 3 years later, 4 inches of dust on the top, we never actually spent an hour on it. Because
my dad did that, and it just filled up workshop space in the end. Yeah, and was with us for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So that is a difficult one. But I think sometimes if you are clever loading your diary and you've got jobs that you've got on site that you've got booked for Thursday, Friday, and it does go quiet on a Tuesday afternoon, you can bring that forward, and that ultimately ends up that customer being happier because the job's been done quicker. But it's a constant battle.
Yeah, it is. It's an ever-moving feast, Good stuff. How do you know you're getting workshop loading right? You're moving jobs to the left. How do you know you're getting it wrong? You're moving jobs to the right. Yeah, but generally you don't know until maybe you're moving it. Well, you can see sometimes a picture of impending doom, probably like the Titanic sailing towards the big old iceberg. Much you can do, but there's going to be a crash and a bang. Yeah, so no, good stuff. Okay, second question I got up for debate is talking about your journeys then as technicians, diagnostic technicians and master technicians to where you are now. If we take that kind of span of the 3, 4, 5 years, that we've known each other, what's changed? So what's changed in a way maybe the diag landscape has gone, or the car technology, or the kind of work that you're doing day to day what sort of shift have we seen or we noticed in the trade in that last sort of 5 years? I'll throw up into the air whether EV has become a bigger prospect or a bigger spectre on your list of stuff. Anyone care to share a view about how stuff's changed for you in the last 5 years?
Well, I find exhaust treatment systems a challenge, because the consumer doesn't know that they're on the car, and they're never told when they've purchased the car and now suddenly they've got 12 sensors that can go wrong, and 3 or 4 converters and system pumps and all these types of things on the car. And we've just been discussing a P20 EE fault code, haven't we, on a vehicle I've got in at the moment. And you're now having a new skill set. When I first started in the industry, what came out of the exhaust was what you measured at the tailpipe, and that was it. But now it's completely different, and educating fleet managers and the general public about these systems is a real challenge, and the costs involved are astronomical.
Yeah, it's a big surprise. I think it's a big surprise that this little warning lights come on, or they got this countdown, and the car really hasn't changed in terms of performance. They're not noticing lots of soot at the back. It's just this light that's come on, and you're absolutely right. The AdBlue and exhaust after treatments that have been with us probably since 2016. 2019 saw them at the end of their warranty period. 2020-21 was the COVID gap. So really 21-22, I think the last 3 or 4 years, they've really become a big problem. I think drop into that. What do you reckon about availability of parts for AdBlue issues? Anyone got trouble?
Shocking.
It's shocking, isn't it?
Shocking.
Yeah, NOx sensors, Mercedes didn't have NOx sensors, did they?
No.
They were pushing aftermarket NOx sensors out as a solution, and goodness knows what they were doing with their software upgrades. Probably expanding some
Parameters
there, 100%.
Yeah, it's really awkward, isn't it? I think we'll dig back into that a bit about the ignorance of somebody buying a car. They're not been told there's all this stuff on it, and it comes down to the garage, you and us, to explain this situation. The guy that sold it or the customers bought it unknowing, and you could say, if you looked at the worst case scenario, if everything needed replacing, let's say somebody come and stole all the stuff, all the AdBlue, you're probably into 4, 5, 6,000 quid's worth of bits. And
Transit AdBlue tanks, £1,500 on its own.
Yeah. NOx sensor for a Toyota, 1,500 quid. The bill racks up, but you become the bearer of bad news. Did you realise that little blue light that's come on now is needing these parts? It's difficult to know, isn't it? Because how are the consumers meant to know, apart from when it goes wrong? So it's tricky.
We're delivering that use. So we do a lot of Ford Transits and tradesmen's vehicles, and they've normally jumped out of an Euro 4 Transit that was completely reliable, and it's the fact that it's falling apart now, but there's no emissions problems with it, and it's never really let them down. They're jumping into a Euro 6 with 40,000 miles on it. They're having AdBlue issues, wet belt issues, all of these sort of things, and then suddenly they're going, well, why is it not as reliable as the one I had before? And so you're having to educate them. And you talk about a wet belt, why is it in oil?
Can't explain it.
I'll explain it, but it's going to take a little while. And we've got endless material for customers to look at to help us explain what's going on, but it is again delivering expensive bad news. And
it is an interesting one. The wet belt thing. Why have we gone wet belts? Well, technically it's about reducing friction, but in reality it's again, clients and maybe garages don't know the implication of using the right oil quality with a wet belt engine. And if somewhere in its life it's had the wrong oil, somebody either didn't know or were cheaping out because it was a 55 quid service and all you could eat service, that's affected the vehicle 20, 30,000 miles down the line, and it's starting to degrade, and it potentially could kill the engine. And sort of nobody but everybody's responsible for that. But you're absolutely right. It comes down to you as the garage to be the bearer of that bad news. And the emission control stuff, I think there's a couple of things that link up there. Tradesman needs the van because that's his way of earning money. So it is urgent now. The parts become unavailable. So what provision can you make to get him mobile again? Well, is it your job to really be supplying him with alternate transport? You feel for the guy because he's stuck now, but you're also under the cosh because your main dealer is telling you it's on back order and we haven't got a delivery time. What do you do? What do you do?
We've had Jaguar Land Rovers sitting on site for over 3 months, waiting for DPFs and parts like that. And you can't supply a courtesy car for that period of time. No. It's not our job to.
No.
And
more bad news, though, isn't it? Yeah, more bad news that's not down to.
And then you get back to it and the battery's flat, and then they've got all the
other issues.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, sometimes if there's almost a blacklist of jobs that you're going to be reluctant to take on because of that, the bad news proportion or the issue with having it on site with no parts. Part of the communication process might be, telling people when they're booking that kind of work in that there is a backlog of if it wants one of these, it's not going to be ready. How do you proceed? Because I think the AdBlue one is kind of a ransom failure, isn't it? Because the light comes on and the car's not going to start in 50 miles. What choice has the client got? Stuck, aren't they? There's no.
But they didn't even know it was on the car.
Didn't even know it was on the car. What is all this? Yeah. No, good stuff. And I think, so AdBlue is a really tricky one. And I think for us as a training company, it's been probably our most popular course over the last 18 or 24 months is AdBlue Diag, because it's very tricky also to get it right first time. There are lots of issues that can happen in the vehicle where your fault codes, that one you mentioned there, 20EE, which is an SCR efficiency below the threshold, there are a whole heap of stuff that can cause that, which are directly related and also indirectly related. And your assessment process, I know I'm talking to the choir here, but your assessment process as a garage has to be on the money, so you're diagnosing the root cause at the first attempt, because if you get it wrong, you can be putting injectors or SCR cats or NOx sensors on which aren't required, which need to be relearned, and they won't be relearned in a system that's failed, so you can never get past this inducement fault test, and you're into a pit of doom, still got the light on, still got the fault, but there are these new parts fitted. And I think, much as I'd love to say a lot of garages are forward thinking and coming on training to prevent issues, that course popularity is because people are stuck with cars on site that they can't fix.
Yep.
And with clients, that are owning those cars that are also annoyed that the cars aren't working. So I think it's probably a bit of a scandal, to be honest, that the trade or the industry, whoever decided on this being implemented, there's not more widely known amongst the motoring public.
I think it's just coming out there now, isn't it? With some cases against and what do they call class action against JLR at the moment and things like that. And but when we first started in the industry, and if you go back 10 years, we didn't have these problems because they weren't on the car.
No. So it's difficult. I think another one, kind of like AdBlue, and I don't know if, is the ADAS surprise. So with autonomous driving, in a slightly different way, but there's another system where clients are not surprised it's on there because it kind of grabs the steering wheel when they go over the white lines, or it puts the brakes on when they're going to have a crash, so they know it's there, but they're quite, in my experience, are sort of telling me they're switching it off. I don't want it on there. I'm switching it off because it gets in the way. It's annoying. But if you're doing your job correctly as a garage and you change suspension parts or something that affects the geometry of the vehicle, that calibration, I know, Mark, you do a lot of the ADAS kind of work. That's another proposition that they didn't know it had to be done as part of the repair. It's another bad news story with kind of implications for the garage being the bad actor,
Yeah, and there's plenty of good actors just down the road that tell them that they don't need that.
Yeah.
Which is scary in itself.
A lot of the main dealers as well. That's the worrying thing. And then if you're going up against the main dealer, from the consumer's point of view, you're wrong. If it's a VW and VW are saying it doesn't need a calibration, well, him down the road is not getting a see into, are they?
No, they think you might be trying to lift their leg. Yeah.
I've also heard it said that if the camera is where the camera was and you have changed the geometry and you're bringing it back to manufacturer specification, then why would you need to change and check the camera again? Because the camera's not been moved or damaged.
Yeah, there's an adaptation process. So you could say that the camera is a fixed position mechanically, but in software it can adapt its central point of view.
Okay.
So the physical box that the camera lives in is fixed, absolutely, but its view about the world can be adapted. So if the car is driving straight up the road and the camera can see the lines are slightly shifted, it will adapt. So this is where the dynamic calibration part comes into, the ADAS. So logically, if you've not physically moved it, then why should we calibrate it? Well, maybe the time that it has been out of calibration, when you correct the steering and now the car's pointing in the right direction, the camera now isn't. So the ADAS calibration gets it back to where it should be. Yeah, so you could say, the black Skoda we've got here, I put in cyclist kill mode. So I calibrated it necessarily to the wrong side. I put the board incorrectly and calibrated the camera. And so when I took my hands off the steering wheel, it's now running over the drains on the near side, cyclist kill mode. And I drove that car for a week up to a course I was doing in Gwent, so I knew I was going. I put it in cyclist kill mode, and then I drove it and it generally adapted over that period of time. Then it learnt that it was too near the near side, and it adapted it to bring it more centrally. So that's really the rationale, I think, behind having to do the calibration when you make a significant change. Is it's not that it won't learn, but in the intervening period, it's going to be in the wrong direction.
So would that be over a period of time that would do that?
Yeah.
Miles. So if the problem's been on the car for a while,
it adapts.
Then it adapts.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's learned it and you're just doing a clutch or something like that, and then you're doing the geometry afterwards, I suppose you don't check the geometry before you do the clutch, do you?
No.
So you won't know.
You won't know. Yeah. So and that's really, I think, the point behind that trigger, Mick, was if you're doing something on the geometry, it gives you an ideal perspective to resynchronize everything, because you don't quite know where it is. And there's a really interesting one you mentioned there, Josh, about the little garage. If we class ourselves in inverted commas as the little garage, and the franchise dealers are the big garage, the staff that are working in the customer communication in the big garage may not actually know about ADAS. They may, but if we look at the repair procedures for Volkswagen, it clearly states when you change the suspension geometry, you have to recalibrate the camera. That's in the factory work instructions, and you've got to sometimes have empathy with the people working in the dealer that front of house may never been told that. And they're labouring under the illusion of what they heard the neighbouring front of house tell the last client, and these myths sort of propagate. And yeah, you're right, then we're up against Volkswagen told me it doesn't need doing. And well, actually, no, it was Jill who used to work in the vets and now works at Volkswagen and told you something she doesn't know about. Yeah, and that becomes gospel, especially when there's a penalty. So you're telling the client advice that's going to cost them something, whereas Volkswagen have said it's not going to cost you. So you're up against a sort of double negative there. Yeah, and that's some of the difficulty, I think, that people don't realise when you're trying to be a professional repairer. These are the mini battles that you've got to have about lifting the standards and making people aware, correctly diagnosing the AdBlue faults, recommending the correct procedures for calibrations when the big boys seem to be saying something different. It's a challenge. And often we as in the independent sector, get denigrated a little bit. We're looked down upon as being a bit shady. Hang on a minute, mate. I got 6 sets of dealer tools here and you've only got 1. I trump you on my dealer tool count. You could say that, or my training I've had over the last 12 months is this big, and we specialise in all these brands and we know all this clever stuff, but you can't do it, so that we're often living under this little barrier that we're not professional. And I think that particularly the people that I get to deal with, like you guys, I see the professionalism coming through, and I go, actually, faced with taking it to a dealer or taking it to a reputable independent, I know where I'd be recommending my son or daughter if they move to university. I often see cars, main dealer history. I'm going, well, the wheels have never been off then. If you break down on the side of the road,
some plugs never been out.
You're going to, at some points, you're going to need a sledgehammer to get the wheel off if you have a puncture. And the motoring public hold the main dealer up against this standard of mythical brilliance, when in fact we all know, we kind of shake our heads a little bit and go, it's not quite like that.
Yeah, and I think that perception's starting to change a little bit. I'm starting to see that, the dealers are careful what you say, because but they are sort of, at the moment they're completely overbooked with recalls and part supply and things going wrong, so they can't, and then suddenly that will go quiet, and they'll have a servicing campaign on that. Suddenly they're doing stuff for silly money just to bring jobs in, and cheap MOTs even. But I'm certainly starting to see that the general public are going, well, no, I'd rather bring it to you and get a good, honest opinion. So.
Yeah, I think the worm is turning. Yeah, I think it is turning. That the big shiny showroom and the free coffee doesn't necessarily translate into an awesome service for your second most expensive asset. And you're absolutely right, Mick. I think the service quality may not be brilliant, and people are seeing that. And I think potentially nicely, as the economy tightens a bit and people are looking at their spend, they see a value option in the independent garage, and they come and experience the service and go, wow, this is actually this is pretty good. Why I didn't do that before is probably they're believing the hype about service and maintenance and maintaining warranty. But I don't think there's many that leave a good independent to go back to the dealer because they're getting shoddy service. No. But I think it happens the other way, that the first taste maybe of an independent garage is where they've been not looked after very well. Because I think, I don't know, good independent garage business is viewing that customer's car, and they realise, as you said earlier on, Mick, that they're under pressure to get Billy to do tennis practice and Ginny to swimming, and they've got to go to work. We've got a very realistic view about what the car means. To a main dealer, they may be thinking about unit volume in sales and how many first services they're getting through, and maybe, I can't speak for sure, but my impression, having worked for several, is that there's more of a impersonal unit type relationship with people in their cars, whereas the independent garage is much more, it could be your mum or your dad.
And the franchise dealers a lot of them used to be family businesses, whereas now they're
mega groups,
big groups, one or whatever, and it's now just shareholders' interest. It's not that brand building of the family garage.
True, very true. I think that's a very good point, where you've got the mega groups that are in charge of some of the dealers, and we've seen a dealer local to here that's changed from a family group to a mega group, now to a mega group, as they've been taken over. And definitely, would I say it's different outlook altogether. Definitely. I think maybe the supermarket perspective of consumerism, volume and smaller margins, but high throughput and not caring. But like the corner shop versus a supermarket, maybe. Don't know what the parallel is, but it's a really interesting one. So we talked about AdBlue. That's definitely a big one. Big change, huge issues, lots of problems. And from a business perspective, thank God for AdBlue, because it is, driving business in. I think the governmental organisations that implemented AdBlue and Euro 6 should have had a major campaign to car owners about the implications of AdBlue longer in its life. I often wondered, did the manufacturers actually know how bad it was going to be in terms of going wrong and failing, and could it go wrong for so many reasons? Because I think there would have been pushback about implementation. I suppose a lot of the manufacturers don't see that many AdBlue faults because the car's dropping out of warranty at 60,000 miles in 3 years. It's a big independent issue, isn't it? Because the cars are doing 80, 90, 100,000 miles and they're at 4 and 5 years old. So it's definitely a job that is bigger for independent garages, I think. What else have we got going on? One of the things also with AdBlue, I suppose, and we talked about it, was with the Mercedes crisis in knock sensors, that they couldn't get them. I think that was on the back of COVID, and then knock sensors were absolutely scarce and rare to get. There were software patches. Is that something that's changed in your experience in the last sort of 5 years? Josh, if I come to you, software kind of patches and updates as part of the diag?
Yeah, so it's something that you didn't really think about at all in the past, and now it can get you completely down the rabbit hole because you'll be on that job and you can't figure out why it's doing what it's doing, and then it's just a software update in the end to solve it. But finding the information on that software update is nigh near impossible. What's inside that software update? Well, unless there's a TSB for it, it's an ECM upgrade or something like that. So that can be a real challenge to actually figure out, it's doing this. Why is it doing it? It's, is it an ECU problem? Well, it could just be a software issue.
Software, cool stuff. So software's become probably a bigger part of the diag almost, that you might be checking for software updates as part of your initial inspection and your initial look through. Special measures for doing software? Is there anything you've got to be careful of when you're doing kind of reprogramming?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the horror stories of BMWs and doing a full reload.
Full scan,
and I think as well, to be fair, we get the same with such large memory in a media unit. It's quite a high possibility in anything media related it will fail. We generally have customers come in for want a full upgrade, and if it's got media in there, it's you sure about this? Yeah. Have you got any problems? No. Okay. Well, carry on.
You may have shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The full software upgrade. Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that. So car drivers that are maybe scouting the forums for their particular make and model are coming in requesting software patches for stuff they're seeing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it's widely known. Maybe that you've picked a really good point there. Media updates. So there's lots and lots and lots of flashy menus and such like inside the media units. That means they take hours, and they can fail during the programming, which leaves you in a bit of a funny position, doesn't it? A car came in working fine, just needing software, and 4 hours later you've updated 9% of the modules, and now you've got a crashed CCC unit in a BM or something that you've got to go back and explain, oh dear, how sad, you need a new unit as well. So
and they're usually really cheap, aren't they?
Yeah, really cheap and made of unobtainium.
Yeah.
So you can't even get one. Yeah, no, so software is a big thing. Mike, I'm going to come to you because I know you do a bit of this. In terms of software updates, I'm going to go completely off-piste and mention the dreaded word EPROMing, and thinking a little bit along the lines of, as we've identified, some parts going end of line, so BSIs, instrument clusters, and other surface units that fit on the car. If you can't get one from the dealer, we talk about green parts. So green parts being parts that have come from another vehicle. I know you're into this a little bit. Tell me what's involved in that side of life.
First started really with Citroen BSI units failing, and sometimes you can't even buy one, and so you had to find a way of purchasing a second-hand one and cloning it, so you had two the same and repairing the fault, and the vehicle's back on the road for a minimal amount of money, or you can't actually buy the part.
Yeah,
a new one.
So what does that involve in terms of gear? What do you have to? What magic goes on to be able to just? Let's say you've got a BSI on a unit on a car that's gone belly up. You can't get a new one. You've scoured all of the green parts providers and you found one of matching numbers.
Yeah.
But likely you're going to have an issue with the VIN number, so it doesn't now match the car, or there's going to be a security code or something in the new one that prevents it from working.
Yeah.
What do you have to do?
So in the early days with a simple old BSI, then usually there'll be find a little EEPROM inside, a little 8-legged thing. You could unsolder, read it, save both of them, and then or swap them over, and then put that in, and maybe some programming with another offline tool. You could get it up and running. But modules are more complicated now, so then you'd need like a more dedicated readers. Say if you want to do a transit custom body control module, then something like IO terminal would drag the information out of the old one and pass it into the new one. Yeah,
so you're essentially taking the unit out of the car, sticking it on the bench, connecting up a power and ground, powering up the unit in isolation of the car, getting a load of wiggly wires from your interface that's connected to your laptop, powering up that unit, and then sucking data out of a flash file or an EEPROM and putting it into some sort of manipulation tool.
Yeah.
Sounds like the stuff of black magic.
Well, not quite. Always got your fingers crossed.
Yes, 2 fingers crossed. And that allows you to transfer the key information to the other unit then.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool stuff. And so how do you go on about explaining that's got to happen? So we just talked about a client not understanding they've got an AdBlue system fitted to the car. Parts are made of unobtainium. How does that conversation unfold, and how do you ensure that you're making money at doing that, or offering a service that supports your clients and chips into your profitability?
Yeah, I mean, with like the BSIs, when you can't purchase them that way and they want their car fixed, then it's like a win-win, because often you can do it for a reasonable amount of money and get the car run again. Obviously, it would be dead in the car park.
Yeah.
I mean, some dealer tools can program second-hand items. So I've had a few MMI modules on Volkswagens fail, and the new ones, they're up around £2,500, and it will just mean the screen doesn't work. And then I've got a new, got a second-hand one. from a reputable breaker, so you know it's not a stolen car. Put them in and program them with a dealer tool, and that's worked and saved,
Save scrap in the car, maybe.
yeah, and saved good £1,500, £2,000.
Yeah, so it's becoming a bigger part. Would you say that that's increased in since the COVID era, where parts supplies? Because what my view is that parts have definitely gone end of line much sooner than they used to. So are you finding that a growing part of the stuff that you do, e-promming and sort of unit?
Yeah,
salvage?
it is. Yeah, it has increased. Yeah, for sure. Because parts have been a problem over the last 4 or 5 years,
and will continue to be so, I think. Yeah. Anybody else in the house doing a bit of e-promming? Anything to add to what Mike's just said?
We do a small amount.
Yeah.
Just engine ECUs. But it just saves time. So if you've got a faulty engine ECU, it saves either buying a new one from the dealer or posting it off somewhere which...
Oh, to get it repaired.
9 times out of 10 comes back as unrepairable or supposedly
No
not
fault
faulty.
found.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good one, isn't it? The ECU repair companies, no names, no pack drills, but you're absolutely right, where a used unit may well shortcut the repair process, especially if you've got something intermittent, where you've got to feel sometimes for the companies that are repairing ECUs, if it's a sporadic fault that's maybe related to engine temperature or vibration or some bouncing along the road, and they're getting this thing sent through the post without a car on the end of it, plugging it into a box of tricks, pulling a couple of levers and going, does it work now? Where on the car it's actually working 95% of the time, it's only 5% of the time it breaks. They're kind of up against it, aren't they, to try and find the issue. So yeah, maybe I think some I see in the trade have reasonable expectations of EC repairers to find intermittent problems, but you've also got cases, I suppose, where the thing is dead. It's dead on a cylinder, or it's not working in some way, and you send it away and it comes back as no fault found. It's difficult to understand how they can't find the fault that's plainly there on the car. So yeah, I see shortcutting that process by sourcing a green part and then coding it into the vehicle.
Yeah, but I find if you start removing them and sending them off, you're basically removing it from its own test bed. So the best place to test it's in the car.
Yeah.
So and if you can test and prove it's faulty, then you don't need it to be confirmed by someone else, and you can just go ahead and get a green part and away you go.
Away you go, yeah. We used to joke a little bit doing the odd seminar that sending an ECU away for repair got you 3 days breathing space while you tried to work out what was actually wrong with it. Where guys are sending ECUs away for testing, and because they've run out of things to test, and that might be a limitation in their knowledge of how to do testing, and they're suspecting the black box without any evidence, but going, whilst ever that's potentially the root cause, I need to get that ruled out. So sending black boxes off, and I'm sure ECU repair companies get hundreds of thousands of units for testing that there's no fault with, because there is a problem somewhere in the car that the technician in that garage maybe isn't aware of a test method or a technique, and is sort of trying to rule out the black box before they get the big guns out. So I think it's a tricky one. Yeah, but e-promming for ECU repairs in that case. Again, I've done a few with an intermittent problem where I've got another unit. I'm going, the chances of this one having the same intermittent problem as the one on the car versus me spending 4 or 5 hours trying to drive it and get the heat temperature and the heat soak in and prove it. It's actually a used replacement that I can code on the bench and fit to the car. If it solves the problems, I've shortcut. It's better value for money for the client, actually, that I've worked out it's an intermittent problem in an ECU by cloning and replacing. So it is, I suppose, a legitimate way of diagnosing an intermittent fault with an ECU by replacing it with another to rule it out when you think it is. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Mark, I'm going to come to you because I know you fettle in this sort of stuff as well, don't you? And your expertise in
a little bit
stuff beyond the binary.
Yeah, it's I just find it interesting.
Yeah. The geek in you loves it.
Yeah, I do, yeah. So that's more Saturday work when we don't work Saturdays, but I'll come in and mess around with stuff like that, yeah.
You put your wizard's hat on and lock yourself in the little cupboard out the back to you and get all your stuff.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
Fired up, yeah.
I've got way too many tools that too many tools to list them, but it's my pastime.
It's rewarding, isn't it? I think I often look at some of that coding and programming a bit like a puzzle, so that you've sort of got a gist of how it might work. You may have never done one, but you take that challenge on. It's quite nice. I quite, like you, therapeutically would do some weird stuff like that because it's a bit of a technical challenge. You can get your geek on, especially if there's unsoldering, as Mike said. If I got to take a big quad chip off as well, I'm in heaven now. I've got to lock the doors, turn the phone off.
Spent a few Saturday afternoons doing that.
Yeah, unsoldering. Yeah, especially if you've got to do a process or something that can't be programmed in situ. Yeah, it's quite nice, technically challenging. So, I get what you're saying there. There is a bit of the geek that wants to get out and have a fiddle with that stuff. And that can come useful because then when you've got to do it for real, if you're doing a hobby job, you do learn those skills and how to do that soldering and desoldering and, file management. Mike was alluding to, reading a file and then putting another file in and keeping the original and changing it. There's a whole aspect of stuff, I suppose, we've gone quite deep, that a lot of people, if they're running a garage, maybe wouldn't understand. But, down at the binary level inside a processor, inside a unit to effect that repair, maybe the difference, as you say, Mike, with an MMI unit on a car that's 10 years old, you've got no air conditioning, you've got no control over the lights or the wipers or the radio or parking sensor, have all gone, haven't they? So to be able to do that sort of work gets that car, and I suppose longer term, keeping another car on the road is actually greener, because all the CO2 in making it has already been spent. If you can preserve its life, you're kind of saving the planet at the same time. So getting your geek on is actually very green. So Greta Thunberg ought to be sending us Christmas cards this year. So you can have your V8 because you did 4 ECUs this month. Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, ECU repairs. Yeah, interesting stuff. So, other question I've got then. EV, we talked about what's changed in the last few years, and we hear a lot about the spectre of electric vehicles were going to change the world. My first electric vehicle was a 99 model year Toyota Prius 1.5, and I sort of saved that thing. It was a good few years old when I got it and rebuilt the battery. It's about 2010, 11, 12, something like that. I can't quite remember, but it was a good while ago. EVs have been changing the world for a long time, but they haven't yet changed the world. What's your personal experience of EVs in the workshop? So either service and maintenance, are you starting to see some of these things, or failures, breakdowns and other problems? Are you getting involved with EV where you work at the minute? Anyone?
It's not changed that much yet for us.
No.
We see the odd thing. I enjoy it. I had a Toyota background, so 20 years on Toyota.
Yeah.
It's not that scary.
No.
A lot of people are scared of it, but I don't think they would be if they did the training.
No. But it's not. So in terms of volume of repair, we're saying I did some work for in fact, it was one of these seminars that I did in June, it must be last year actually, about electrification, and the principle was, is it changing the world? And the research I did, there's 40.5 million cars on the road in the UK. There's 66 million people. There's 40.5 million cars, and 3% of them in the car part mix are electric or derivatives thereof. So in terms of the work, if you imagine 100% of the work coming into the workshop, if you're average, you'd see 3% vehicles being electrified. Do you reckon that's about right? Bearing in mind, are they more or less reliable than diesels and petrols?
I was going to say ours is about less than 5.
Yeah. Interesting. So if you're an average, you're seeing 3%. So, yeah. But prepped for it, ready for it? I know you are, Mark. You're obviously geared up. Mick, are you geared up for EV?
Yeah, we've been advertising and set up an EV part of Shakely's. What I'm finding is that the 3% is 100% right, but I don't think 100% of the garages want to accept that 3%.
No.
So if you're up and ready and you're saying that you can do it, then you're taking that 3% and you're getting the vast majority of it.
Yeah.
And then what that then leads into is that we're thinking about doing various things to promote the fact that if you own an EV or thinking of owning an EV, because the next car purchase could be an EV. A customer with an ICE engine that's using us at the moment, but if they don't know that we're going to do EV, then their next purchase will be, oh, it's EV, so I'm going to take it back to the dealer or whatever. So it really is. I think the 3% is 100% right, but I don't think more than 3% of the garages are leaning in to do the work and are prepared to do the work. So we're seeing a steady increase in EV servicing and repair work, lots of suspension and tyres, and the odd sort of aircon compressor fault and bits and pieces. And yeah, it's coming to us because other garages won't do it. So I think you need to just get on with what's in front of you and make sure your customers know that if they do buy an EV that they can bring it back to you. Yeah,
because it's an interesting way that you could lose a client if they didn't know you did EV. So you're absolutely right. By making people aware you can do it is spot on. And another brilliant point you make there, if there are 10 garages in your local area and you're having all of their 3% as well, that actually adds up to a good chunk of work. And a lot of garages tend to be reluctant to do it. I think I was at a conference the other week in Farnborough, and the thought struck me as I was on stage, and I'm afraid it did come out, is EVs, you can't be a little bit pregnant. You're either doing EVs or you're not. You can't say I'm going to do them when there's enough of them, because if you're not geared up and prepared, you haven't got the gear, you haven't got the knowledge, you haven't got the training. Actually, the first one you get is a no, because you're not ready. You have to be ready in advance, because when they come, you have to accept to take them on. So,
and it is a learning curve, isn't it? You can't just expect to. No. So the Zoe we've just done an aircon compressor on, we did the training and we got paid to do the training, and we might have lost a few hours, but we're now armed and ready for the next one that comes around the corner, or potential problems. So you have to. We're going to be taking a Nissan Leaf battery out together, aren't we, guys?
It's an arranged meeting.
Yeah, cool.
We get to go to Mick's house and see the mansion and everything.
But no, we're planning. I've got one at work that we're going to use as a training thing for myself as well as our team self, and it's good trying to get these guys on board. So
you need to do it. I think until you do it, the EV batteries is always the first time you do it. It's a bit scary because although you've seen it and you've been on training and you've sort of what's in there. It's until you've conquered that first job, really, you get your confidence level builds. If you work through it, you kind of start to appreciate the weight and the unwieldiness of it and how it comes apart. And then when you take the covers off, what that's like to get the cover off. And the Nissan have got a really good seal on their battery cover, so that's a bit of a mission. Even splitting the clamshells a bit of a mission, and then cleaning it off to put it back together. So taking the battery out, is quite simple in terms of mechanical, but then the techniques about making sure it's sealed up afterwards and actually what's in there, not too scary. But it's an awesome thing if you're going to do that, because it gives you that confidence to be able to do one for real. And it's back to that, training in the real world of doing and experiencing that will give you that confidence.
It's a bit like doing your first engine now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's no different. You're gonna have to do it twice, maybe, or and then hopefully it just becomes the norm.
Yeah, exactly that. I think you learn stuff that you don't know. So I think the gaps between the manual is what you learn when you do it for real. Yeah, where you've read the procedures and you read the processes, but it didn't mention something. But the engine's a great one. If you've never honed a bore, if you've never gapped a piston ring, you've never lined piston rings up on a piston, taken out a gudgeon pin circlip, or whatever that is about that. You can kind of do it, but you haven't got the confidence having the experience of doing it. So doing your first one gives you that confidence. And like your air conditioning compressor there, that is a bit of an on-the-job training course, and then you've now got that level of experience to do it. So being prepared for EV is definitely a good shout. I know you guys are all trained and qualified to that level, and I think it's a very wise move, I think, to be shouting out that it is something that you can cope with. There is undeniably less work involved with EV if we look at repair costs. Again, at the conference we were at the other week at the Garage Hive, they showed some information from Garage Industry Trends and invoice values for the various vehicles. And Andy Crook did a really good talk about the demise of diesel or not. And then is EV taking over? That the the invoice values for EVs are smaller, so you need more of them, more volume of work to maintain the same turnover and profitability. So those 3% are going to contribute. And actually, if you get in there first and really get the market locally that you're the go-to EV people, you're going to be less affected as the cars shift on. And I often think when I look at EVs, are EVs dominating? I think really the real message is, what are you going to do when diesels disappear? It's not about EVs taking over the world. It's about diesels going. And I think that's the bigger question. So whenever we talk about EVs, I got to always reflect back to, it's not about EVs, it's about diesels going. And what we're seeing now, if we take new vehicle sales for the last XDX years, they've been declining slowly. We're now at single digit, 6%, 6.3% last year of new car sales with diesels. That meant 95% of vehicles aren't diesel. So the pool of diesels out there in that 40.5 million is not growing. Diesels are getting older. What happens with an old diesel? Well, it soon becomes uneconomical to repair and they get scrapped. So they're not being replaced by new ones. So therefore, you've got to say the pool of diesels in the market is shrinking. So it's not necessarily that EVs are coming, but diesels are going. EVs are growing, and derivatives, hybrids, and plug-in mild hybrids and full battery electric are certainly growing. But the biggest problem I think we face as an industry is what happens when they all disappear. We've talked about it before. There's a new emission tester coming that measures particulate matter. That was, I think, always part of the government's two-pronged attack in getting rid of diesels and trying to get EVs going. That is rolled out in Holland, and it's also rolled out in Germany, and it's going to roll out in the UK. And what they've seen in those territories are there's definitely an increase in the failure rate, especially with cars that have had modified, in inverted commas, or solutions fitted to them, where you've got swirl flaps off or EGRs off and that type of stuff, DPF deletes. I think there's going to be a lot of coming home to roost when we get that new emission tester. So the particulate matter counter counts the molecules of particles coming out of the exhaust pipe rather than the cronky old test that we've had for the last 30 years, which is opacity. So yeah, that is really going to put the pressure on the bottom end of the diesel market. So deleted cars and cars that are outside of the scope now are going to fail, and they're going to shrink further. And I think that middle ground of diesels is going to shrink and shrink. So if you think about your own garages, if you look at the cars that you've dealt with the last month, what proportion were diesel, would you say? Finger in the air time.
I would say 70%.
Yeah. Typical, yeah. It's a good 70% and upwards, generally no less than 70. We're starting to see a proliferation of petrols. Petrols have been the dominant sales model for the last 5, 6, 7 years. 55 or 60% of all new vehicles sold are petrol derivatives. Hybrids have also got the best of both worlds, or the worst of both worlds. They've got an electric motor and a battery and an internal combustion engine. So if the world transitions to hybrid rather than full electric, we're laughing. But the shrinking of diesel is really the concerning factor. So we need to be gearing up probably for a bit more petrol engine management stuff. How is your direct petrol injection knowledge, your knowledge of GPFs, your knowledge of ignition analysis and fuel injection systems, and probably specialising in an injector test bench for diesels at this moment is probably not a great business plan, as they're all kind of moving away. I think just like adopting for electric vehicles, are we letting the world know that we can do this stuff? Are we thinking about our marketing plans? Are we thinking about business development to be ready for the demise of diesel? Is a question. Is it in your business plans? Don't know. Not sure. It's a kind of hidden behind the main banner of EV is coming.
I mean, even going on diesel training courses now it's a short-term solution, isn't it? You're going to, as you said, gasoline or petrol management systems. They're complex now, aren't they? They're running 2 stages of injection, and then you've got the gasoline particulate filter, and then we've got lambda sensors, and they're a finite thing, dark art, aren't they? And you've got to get that knowledge, and how many other small things with fuel trim and air leaks and stuff like that. How they're going to throw some curveballs at us, aren't they? So
yes, and they are. And I think also there's a generational thing. Being old enough and having enough grey hair, that in my junior years as a technician in 1991, when I was technicianing, the first lambda sensor vehicles came out. So we went from carburetors to single point injectors. In 1991, cars had to have an oxygen sensor and a catalytic converter, and there were almost no diesels, can you believe, in light vehicle. And so having lived with that through the generation of single point and multi-point injections, single single oxygen sensors, then a catalytic converter, then 2 oxygen sensors, and the proliferation of petrol engine management. If you're 45 plus, you've probably had a good grounding in petrols, or you were just at the end of it. If you're any younger, it's a bit of a mystery, really. If you can't tell me what a fuel trim does, we can rattle that off because we've been dealing with it. But yeah, I think there's going to be a bit of potential for misdiagnosis in garages that aren't keeping up to date with that proliferation of petrol engines is now coming. We're seeing that, maybe 25 or 30% of the cars we're doing. It's definitely a growth area, and I think that's probably one of the things that is changing now more so over the last few years.
The control systems are so much more complex now, aren't they, as well? They give so much more information.
Yeah.
And they can change from one manufacturer to another. One manufacturer will go, which is this way, high voltage, and another one will go, no, that's lean.
Yeah.
So it's getting your head around those systems.
That's why I think OBD really is key for those sorts of problems, because it's the standard. It's always the same.
True.
But how helpful will it be in the future? Don't know. It's there's definitely a set of rules that they have to follow, but it seems to be going a bit more to the wayside in a way. I see some of the PIDs that sort of should be there aren't there and stuff like that. So I think, it happened, 1996 when it came in. So it's probably getting a bit lax now.
Yeah, and it changed Euro 5 then in 2000. I'm trying to think for petrols, and then diesels went Euro 5 and then Euro 6 in 2016. So Euro 5, EU 5 petrols support that EOBD2 standard. The ones up to 96 were EOBD or OBD1. Even back to 91, they had to have some form of sort of structure about how the diag was done, how the system's onboard monitors worked. But we're about to go into Euro 7 for petrols. Right, and there's I sat in on a seminar run by Marley and their engineering teams that are into rolling roads and emission controls, and it was part of a working group, and some of the stuff they were talking about, the standard's not quite been set because of all the messing about, a little bit with COVID, a little bit with the demise. So up until a few years ago, we weren't really thinking about the end of the internal combustion engine. The government have said 2035, the EU has said no more internal combustion engines. The crazy guy, Boris the Clown, then pulled that forward to 2030 in the UK, said we can out-EU the EU, we're going to do 2030. And they've since rolled it back in 2035. But, 2035 is 11 years away, no more internal combustion engines. Really, the manufacturers are gearing up to go, do you know what, there's no point developing anything else. Whatever we've got, we're going to stick with until, because that's going to peter out in year 8 and 9. The sales of internal combustion engines are going to be almost null. That's gone back again, and now EU7 is on the agenda as an emission standard. So EU6 on a diesel gave us the AdBlue. EU7 on a diesel gets even worse. Lots of SCR injectors and all that sort of stuff. But on a petrol, it gets even freakier, and they're talking about as part of the standard, a different way of illuminating the warning light depending on a fault status or not. So going a little bit towards the AdBlue side of life, where you get a warning light when the system's malfunctioning. For a petrol engine, they're suggesting that the light's got 3 colours of status: a green for it to be okay, an orange for it to be in an undecided state, and a red for there to be a fault. So at the moment, we're currently dealing with cars that if the light comes on, we know there's a problem. If the light doesn't come on, we think there's no problem, but there might be. We get into that mismatch of pending DTC, so there's a fault, but it's not a hard code. EU7 sees the end of that. If the light's not green, i.e. something's gone awry, but not a major catastrophic fault, the light goes orange and they've got to take it in somewhere. So there's changes afoot about the way the cars are managing their own faults. And okay, EU7, if that comes out next year, it's going to be 3 years till we get to deal with it. So it's going to be 2025, 2028 before we're knee deep in it. But there are lots of the emission control heated catalytic converters are coming in, so the car's got to be up to a warm-up cycle really, really quickly. They're talking about the emission control. So units that are fitted to the car that are related to emission controls have to last much longer. So I think there's a standard now that something, don't quote me on this, but there's a finite life that they're expected to last for 100,000 miles whilst they still perform well. The standard seems to be dictating that that's been increased by a factor of 2. So an EOBD compliant device has to be capable of working for 200,000 miles. And the monitoring that they're putting on it, is it slightly wonky or not, are much tighter. So if you've got an air mass meter that drifts out of tolerance a little bit, badunk, on comes the light. No longer is it green, it's orange. I'm getting a wonky reading from your mass airflow sense, so you need to get a car in for service. So the whole strategy around managing minor faults that can affect the emissions has been focused on. And I think that's what I see as the next learning curve is EU7 and that proliferation of petrol engine stuff. We're going to have a whole heap of, I think it's going to be AdBlue Mark II. We're going to have that surprise clients.
And a lot of them are going to have some electric bolted onto it as well.
Electric bolted on, GPFs, dual cats and heated cats, and some very clever stuff coming that's going to present us with nicely some extra challenges to get our heads into. So I think that's probably something that's coming that we need to be aware of. So watch out for all the EU7 stuff and jump on that. If you see any of that, you get a chance to look into that too, because it's spelling out what's coming around the corner. Yeah, cool stuff. Okay, here's an interesting one. At the Blend, I did a little session on AI. As you know, I've been messing about with Trevor, the AI Master Technician, and it's quite good. My favourite question to Trevor is, Trevor, tell me everything you don't know about. Well, how can I tell you I don't know about it? It's quite an interesting question philosophically, knowing what you don't know. AI, what's your views about AI? What's your experience of AI? Has anybody been fiddling with ChatGPT? Or such like? What do you reckon?
Yeah, so I mainly use it for ends of work job card.
Nice.
It leaves it a way that I can write in, technical terms or anything, and it's able to put it in a presentable manner. I found it quite helpful. It definitely made me see its limitations as well. Frustration with it sometimes is unbearable. I mean, I remember one time it always came out as bold text, and if I needed to put that into an email, it came out wrong. So you think a simple task of telling it to not put in bold text would be a simple task. Yeah. It was impossible because it just came back with, yep, I'll do that now, and do the exact same thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny, yeah. So it's helped with phraseology and kind of terminology of stuff. Yeah, that's really nifty. Now, I know the guys at Garage Hive, funny enough, exactly that subject came up. So they've got it was implemented a week or two ago now. I think the Monday after the conference, they've got something called Copilot, which lives as part of the infrastructure. They use a Microsoft platform, and Microsoft got Copilot. So they've got something implemented that takes on those text fields, and if you build a job with a component, so suspension, it can start to string together something around the suspension thing that you're replacing. So it helps populate the customer, the job card or the VIE, the vehicle inspection for the client, and it's kind of fruits up the language and makes it simple to use. So yeah, that's again a pretty interesting use case. Dan, you said you've had a fiddle with it. What have you found?
Generally, just stuff like writing emails, finding replies for certain things, and just I haven't delved any deeper than that, but I found it helpful for
wordsmithery stuff. So, like turning you into a bit of a Wordsworth with your emails. Yeah, so that's pretty nifty.
Yeah, it just saves time sitting there thinking about what to write and how to write it, and
No, not yet. Not knowingly. No.
Your phone is listening to everything.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. I think it's like having a very clever mate. You can reference stuff. So when I've had technical problems, I've used it for. Just to look at things in a different way. Sometimes you're stuck in a zone, and it helps. I had one particular problem that I kept asking it questions, and in the end, it came up with not the solution, but an idea which became the solution. And and I used it with some of the training I've done here, and I've implemented into the business and had to do a talk on. That was really handy there because it kind of learns what you're doing. So it started off with talk about this, and I'd read the answer. I'd say, we'll say that again with more passion. And it would come up, and you were piecing bits out of that. And
Awesome.
it really helped me there. And I think there is a future there, massive, especially with what you're doing with Trevor and stuff, and getting all of that good information in one place, and it can pick up. But yeah, it's going to really change how we go about our business day to day, and it's going to make things lots easier. But then, is it going to cause some confusion that somebody else can go and ask AI, is the garage telling me the truth because they've done this and this? So
Yeah.
but yeah, I use it, and it's like anything, it's here, so you have to embrace it. It's not going to go away. So.
No, it's not going to go away. It's interesting about its impact, as we've just talked there. So it's helping us to do some of those menial tasks. It's often, when you think about the internet came about in the mid 90s, let's say, it really gathered storm. And when the internet came around, first of all, I was a bit of a computer geek. So in 1981, I got my first computer. I was at school. I would have been in the second year at school then. And then I sort of got into it really at the early stages and have been going through it. But in 1995, the internet came out, and people didn't understand what the internet could do. And actually the prospect of ever making money or having a commercial advantage by the internet, people thought you were bonkers if you said that, because it was essentially a load of text strings, and you'd get to somebody's web page and it would just be like a piece of paper like that with text on it. So the implication of the internet wasn't really widely known, only that we thought it was a good idea to connect the computers together because it would enable us to communicate better. But look at the internet now, it really drives everything. If you said to somebody in 1995 you'll be streaming videos through your TV, through your telephone line in the future, or you can stream stuff through the handheld communicator that's got a robot in it that tells you clever stuff, they just wouldn't believe it. And I think we're probably on the precipice of that with AI. In that the implications truly we don't quite yet understand. But yeah, getting stuck into it, Mike, set yourself some homework, get yourself into ChatGPT and ask it all the stuff you need to know the answers to. It's pretty good. Mark, are you ChatGPT and AI?
No, I think I've got some homework to do with Mike.
Okay, yeah, do homework now.
Ask it how long to cook your chicken for.
Yeah. You having chicken tonight, are you?
Sounds like it.
Sounds like it. One of the things I did, for some things. So where it's really helpful, I find, if you want to get into if you're doing your own social media posts, for instance, because you're gearing up to communicate with your clients in that way, it's awesome for a couple of things. Give me suggestions for social media posts for my garage business to my car owners for the next month. I want to do 3 a week, and they want to be on different subject matter. It will write you the articles that you can post on Facebook. Yeah, so it does all the text. Images you can find from the garage, but it will talk about a plan. Give me a plan to support my client communication. It will do that. One of the awesome ones is kind of on a theme that you guys had there. If you get a customer complaint and you sort of your danders up a bit because it wasn't necessarily a fair complaint and you want to get all punchy on your keyboard, what you can do is take the client complaint and drop it into the ChatGPT, and you can ask it to pen an empathetic response from the business owner, and it will come up with a really good, not the final answer, but it will really get you into the groove of the words that you might be able to use to address that issue. It takes the emotion out of it, and I found that quite useful. We've done it for the service advisor groups that we've had. We've gone through websites, picked 1-star reviews and dropped them into ChatGPT, because I said one of the things we find a challenge is how to answer that objectively, and it does that. It sort of gives you an idea. It takes the sting out, it takes the passion out of it, takes it and just puts it down in a perfectly, you can read that and go, right, I can see the gist, and that gives me an idea that I can rewrite the response correctly to that client, if that's the way it's gone. We did some crazy stuff then. We take that response that it's given us, and the power of ChatGPT, I turned it into a country and western song. So I said, right, turn this into a 4-verse country and western song, and it takes the response to the complaint and turns it into a country and western song, and it does it in an awesome way that it rhymes and it actually makes a load of sense.
Maybe not send that one back to
No, it depends.
Just listen to this.
But the power of it's immense, and it's a bit bit joyful. Like, but then what I did is I got it to turn it into the voice of Barack Obama, and I said, right, rephrase this in the style of Barack Obama, and it drops it in as if he's actually speaking the complaint, and it uses his phrases and words, and it's just like the mental agility of it to do that stuff is just off the scale. In it would take you hours if you were that way inclined to make a country and western song out of a client complaint. But the power of it is just immense, and that's kind of useless stuff that I'm doing to show the power.
And the crazy thing is, the more you use it, the more it learns
absolutely
about you and the type of person you are.
Yeah,
and it's quite weird because you sort of the passion bit, and it kind of suddenly grasps your personality, and it really is quite scary sometimes.
It's tailoring the responses to the way that you were asking it questions. It is, and that's the adaptability, which is also really powerful for in asking it questions. Do you think what can you see? So Diag's an interesting one, and you mentioned a really cool point there about snapping you out of the loop that you're in. Sometimes you get in that mental loop of I can't see the wood for the trees, and actually firing a question in. Sometimes it comes up with complete rubbish, and sometimes it comes up with what it believes is the answer, but it isn't, called hallucination, because it doesn't really understand. The large language models really are just guessing the next word in the sequence. They have got no kind of understanding of the real world, but they are stringing words together because they've been trained on all the stuff that's out there in the internet, so they can generally match phrases. But you've got to be careful and ask it, are you sure? Can you just recheck that? And it'll come back, nope, you were right, actually I got that completely wrong. So you have to be very, very careful about over trusting it. But Diag's another good one, and obviously one of the use cases we see for it is on historical faults and trends in faults and patterns in faults, that it can start to join connections that we can't see early doors. So you give it enough information about enough types of jobs, it starts to join connections that aren't initially obvious, and you can say, well, if you've got this type of thing, in my case history of stuff I've also seen, these were a factor, and it can help give you that inspiration to widen your thinking. It's a bit like we were talking when you send the ECU away for testing. Those garages are kind of focused that it's in the black box, and I can't get past my thinking because it's in the black box. And until I send that away for testing, I won't snap out of it. This is where I find the ChatGPT is awesome, because you can throw at those symptoms and go, okay, if you had a car doing this, what sort of stuff would you go at? And then you can ask it, okay, predict the probability, and it will sort of reorder them a bit, and you can go, well, that's interesting. I didn't think of that. So I like what you said there, Mick. It's like your clever mate. It's like a reflective mate that you can kind of throw stuff out to it and see what comes back. It's almost like taking all your thoughts, shaking them up, and reordering them. So it's great in terms of that inspiration as well.
It doesn't have attitude either, does it?
It can
ask it.
It can if you ask it.
No,
if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah. Very interesting. You must delete your ChatGPT history once. No, but it is really cool. It doesn't have attitude, and you can poke it any time, day or night, and it's on form.
I've used it, so I've had a difficult situation with people's, sometimes staff or customer attitudes. And I've literally gone, how do I deal with an aggressive member of staff or an aggressive customer?
Yeah.
And it kind of just, you do that, and it says, well, you need to take a step back. You need to just, and it just settles you. Whereas I'm quite fiery, or I have been in the past. And I go,
breathe.
Best approach is that.
Let me just talk to my friend here before I speak to you.
Yeah, how do I deal with a sassy member of staff? Thank you.
Yeah, it is really good, and I think you again raise a good point that the scope of its understanding is immense. That you can ask it, quite specific, narrow questions. You can ask it to rephrase this thing, or you can ask it something completely out of the blue, and it gives you a perspective. And I think one of the really interesting things is how that also might change your internet search habits. And I think I read a book that was developed in about 2016. It was titled Life After Google. And at that stage, 2016, Google were the big. And the book piqued my interest because I'm going, well, I don't think what is going to come after Google? And it got me thinking, well, what is going to come after? Well, Google sort of rules search engines and they rule the world by hook or by crook. I don't know if you guys know, but Google have had a court action against them in the States that they've got to be broken up because of the domination, and they've been allegedly up to nefarious activities of bribing companies like Apple and Samsung or inducements to include them in their apps to dominate the world of search. So there's been a court ruling that says you've got to break this company up, and they're currently fighting that claim. Anyway, side issue, Life After Google kind of said, well, if you can do search results that are more than just a list, and it starts to phrase this in a way that you're looking for, and you'll see now on most of the search engines, there's an AI bit at the top. Because not only is it giving you a list of resources you've got to go away and look at, but it's starting to give you advice about the thing that you've put in there, and then it's signposting in a more accurate way what you're looking for. So it's the ultimate clever search response. And this is one of the factors that this book alluded to, kind of, was that if somebody came up with a method that was more responsive than just a list of links, you'd be in it. You're onto a winner. And I think that's one of the things that is definitely happening, that the artificial intelligence is making smart searches more smart. And you raise an awesome point there, that we as garages kind of have to be kind of alluding to our clients who are looking for information about their fix or the stuff you've told them might well use a ChatGPT to validate and to square the circle. Is that true? Is it realistic? Is that the right kind of thing? So we're going to have to be aware as client-facing business people that that's going to be a factor. It's no longer if they come out with a printout of the stuff they found on the forum. They've got a response that's been penned to your initial quote or estimate that's pulled it to bits because ChatGPT says you shouldn't be putting a gasket when you do that bearing, and actually that sealant's wrong for that job, and they're going to come in and challenge you on the stuff that you've put. It empowers people beyond their normal technical level, and that's one of the good things that we're all finding, because it helps us go past where we are normally with just a search. But it could lead to challenges the other way around with savvy clients that are validating what you're telling them. So it's a really good point you raised there, Mick. Yeah, so it could change things slightly. Yeah, and we'll wait for the first report of clients taking your fault code readouts and coming back with what ChatGPT says. No, you're wrong, mate. Look, ChatGPT said this, that, and the other. So, yeah, it's putting us under pressure to be more accurate as well, and maybe we're using that as part of our suite of making sure that we're correct and right. So, yeah,
or maybe they'll just turn around and put it in and go, I'm never going to understand that. I'll just let them get on with it.
Well, do you know what? The crazy thing is, explain it so that an 8-year-old would understand. So what I did as part of my blend chat is I took the Volkswagen SSP for AdBlue systems, and I fed it the 40-page document, and I got it to explain it to me like an 8-year-old would understand it, and it did. So that demystifying I did that for a particular reason in that presentation, but it summed it up really well. AdBlue is a magic fluid that helps reduce harmful emissions from your diesel. It was all this kind of phrasing, but it went through the whole book and it explained it in simple terms. So I think, making, even where you can't grasp the knowledge particularly, you can get to the detail. So some of my research with Clever Trevor is I've used AI to help me expand my understanding of some of the deep technical stuff so the computer coding that's involved in building a system. My knowledge is about a centimetre thin, but it goes quite wide because I've used ChatGPT along with YouTube videos and all the other stuff to get into the programming and coding of an AI and training the model and understanding RAG systems and all this other clever stuff I knew nothing about, a year ago. ChatGPT's helped me. I've taken some code from an application and dropped it in there and said, right, can you comment this code and explain to me what it's doing in these steps? I know nothing about coding, but it's helped me go way beyond my technical capability to understand this stuff that was written by some boffins at Manchester University. And now I can talk authentically about what that code's doing. And I'm thinking people will come back to us in our expertise and our zones of knowledge with that same challenge in a way. So we're going to have to make sure we stay up to date, or you'll have to have a big sign in the reception.
Sometimes the EV drivers knew more about cars than we did.
Yeah.
at the time, because they've done the research and they're into it and they want it to work, and they've done all of the research and they've got something on their phone that's giving them the battery readouts and stuff like that, and we were like, you want a job?
Yes, true. It's gonna maybe challenge us that way, and I think excitingly, we don't know the limitations, we don't know the extent of its impact, but I think it's going to be probably beyond what we see even from the internet, the change pre-internet to post-internet era. I think the AI is definitely the biggest thing that we will experience in our lifetime, undoubtedly. The impact it will have, negative or positive, I don't know, but the impact is going to be mighty. So yeah, if you're not playing with it, play with it, have a look, see what it can do. I just wish I had it when I was doing some of my college courses and degree learning, because it would have saved me hours and hours, not necessarily writing it all, but in terms of give me an idea about a subject, give me 10 different perspectives on something. It really helps you expand your knowledge. So yeah, kids of today, don't know how lucky they are.
Your maths homework would have been easy, wouldn't it?
It would have been, yeah.
Level 4 EV would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the mission. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, ChatGPT did my EV homework for me. Yeah. Oh, interesting stuff. Yeah, cool. So, chaps, I got another question that I'd like to float out to you about your experience of the industry as we see it now, and your experience of where you've been on your journey, where you are to date. If somebody came to you that was looking at starting up their own endeavour, and they were going maybe from an employed basis to self-employed, and they were going to start up their garage. Some of us have been on that journey. Some of us have been along others with that journey that were in their team. What would be the thing that you would probably tell them that would either save them making mistakes or accelerate their advancement? So I'm going to come to Mark with this one as a start, and I'm going to go around you chaps in order. What one piece of advice maybe do you wish you'd had, Mark, when you were setting up, that you would pass on to somebody that's maybe in the position that you were in when you were setting up your garage? What would it be? What do you think?
To do what you're passionate about, not what you think other people want you to do. So I went into partnership with somebody, and it took me down a route that I wouldn't have chosen. So yeah, choose your route and stick to it.
Yeah, that's a good one, because you have to love what you do, don't you? Because it is being the master of your own ship is very hard.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good one. So do what it is that floats your boat or that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, nifty. That's a really cool one. Mick, what do you think?
Be very careful who you deal with. I wish I'd have perhaps been more disciplined and not just accept work is work. And then suddenly your stresses are because of the car or the customer that you've accepted for repair. So I wish I'd have been braver in a bit of, I wouldn't say, making sure that I'm going to get a positive outcome for the customer and for the business. Because if that's not ever going to be fair to the customer or the business if both of those aren't aligned.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's a really interesting one. So yeah, customer selection, there's a lot about, kind of goes back to what Mark says, a little bit maybe about values and expectations and being on the same wavelength as, your mission and your objective and your solution of fixing and repairing and maintaining cars. If people have got different value levels or expectations, there can be that complete mismatch. They're looking for something that you can't deliver potentially, or that you don't want to deliver, or so that there is about meeting of the minds or being on the same wavelength, or agreeing to disagree. Win-win or no deal. There's a lot of that kind of terminology about a joint outcome, and that's where most of the partnerships and ventures that you no doubtedly are in now with parts suppliers and vendors of equipment and other tools and training, where you're on the same wavelength when we share a value and we know we could deal with each other. There's a lot of that. Again, one new tech to business springs to mind that's taking on the wrong work necessarily because the diary's got gaps in it, and any work's better than no work, when in fact, I think the wisdom of being in business goes, actually the right work is the only work.
The right work's the only work, and also you won't be able to do the right work if you've got too much of the wrong work. So Mm. Mm. Mm.
I'm exempt from this question.
Yeah, well, maybe. Okay, so imagine you were jumping out on your own, or what have you witnessed? You know, some of the things that you would advise somebody going out on their own that you've experienced. It's not necessarily that you have to be in business, but you know, what would you, if you're in that situation? Not the saying that you are. What have you witnessed that you know?
Yeah, I mean, biggest thing I think you always think about is going in pricing low, really, don't you? Starting out, you've got no reputation, you've got to do the low price stuff. And anyone that I've spoken to that's done it has said, don't start off like that, because that'll be your clientele.
Yeah.
From that point onwards, is you will be the bottom feed and the low clientele, and you've already passed up on the bigger players. So that I've always said is, you know your worth and stick with that.
Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, very true. It is. I think often it's easy to undervalue what you do when you're trying to build the business and you think price is the only thing that's important to you. Actually, your best customers don't really care about price. They care about that they can trust you, that the quality of your work's awesome, that you do what you say you do when you say you do it. And price is almost secondary, because they know if the price is too cheap, the service can't ever be set up to match that expectation, and they see price as a red flag. All the bottom feeders see price as the primary selection factor, and they would be buying, you know, cheap meat and cheap shoes and cheap trousers and cheap. They're just in the cheap zone. Nothing wrong with it, but they're not really worried about the value of the service. So yeah, it's a great point. It's about quality, not value. But confidence is another one. Yeah, and I think some of that can be done. My own personal mantra, my advice for anyone setting up a business is go and get business training. Do not jump out on your own until you've done at least some training about business. So you understand the finance, you understand the marketing, you understand a bit about logistics law, and you understand a little bit about hiring and recruiting people. You've got a balanced view about business. Go and work in a business with that knowledge and witness that when you're still working for somebody else, and then take the lessons that you're seeing because you've got the training and you've got the experience, and start off from a very good base. And I see a lot of garage owners have been through a painful journey, and it could have been maybe made a little bit less painful by understanding that what you just said there about knowing your worth and knowing about value and knowing about pricing. Yeah, it's very wise words there, Josh. Mike, tell us what you know.
I think in the early days, not being so desperate to keep that diary full and swerving some of those horrible jobs that you take on because you're worried about having enough work and money and everything, and you'd be better off prioritising good jobs and not taking on horrible engine jobs. Stuff like that, you know, and usually on a car's end of life anyway, and everything's going wrong with it, everything's breaking, and it just ends up a horrible job.
Yeah. And you own it then, don't you?
Yeah, and big timing belts, snapping chain jobs. I probably should have swerved them and concentrated on the cleaner work and servicing.
Servicing, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? One of the things that struck me as you were talking there is sometimes the way we often look at the way the main dealer does it, and people are often scoffing that the main dealer wouldn't do this or the main dealer wouldn't do that, but we can do it. And sometimes you've got to look, well, the reason the main dealer won't do that is because they know that's not a robust and reliable repair, that if you did it properly it would outweigh the value of the car, and they're actually rejecting it as a job, not rejecting the method of doing it. And yeah, whereas a novice businessman might go, I can certainly do that, you know, replacing this bit within a transmission rather than replacing the whole transmission. The dealers go, no, because if you do that, it's the next bit's going to drop out and the client's going to be back to you. So yeah, the process and understanding what jobs are winnable. But yeah, you're right, the pressure actually when you set up, I think another thing that often happens is the under-resourcing. So we don't have enough capital behind us to give us the confidence to say we don't need to do those works. We've now got T-minus 30 days to make the wage bill. We've got to make the rent and the rates, and the tax, whatever else is going, all the subscriptions have got to be paid for. And that pressure can sometimes maybe cloud the way that we've got to do it properly. We're kind of, oh shit, I've got to get it.
Or the type of work you accept.
Yeah, I've got to get it done.
When you shouldn't do.
When you shouldn't do. Yeah. No, that's a really interesting. But I think maybe there is a way of doing that as long as you realise that's a short-term, get you going goal. But what we tend to find is that the clientele that want that sort of work doing will recommend you to all their other friends that want that kind of work doing, and the vicious circle of negative jobs. Oh yeah, he'll do that sort of thing, he'll put a second-hand one of those on that. And yeah, you have to be very careful to manage yourself out of that. If you need the work to get the volume going, yeah, it's great, but being able to delicately reject work. Cool, that's really interesting, Mike. Dan, what do you reckon? Stuff you wish you knew all those years ago?
As vehicle technicians, we're good at fixing cars, but the business side of things generally doesn't come naturally. So, yeah, I've made loads of mistakes, and knowing what your costs are and what your overheads are before you start working your labour rates out, and because without knowing that, I've run for years not making a profit and chasing your tail and not paying bills and juggling who you're paying, and that's the biggest one for me. Yeah,
it's very true. Knowing your underlying cost of doing business is what dictates your labour rate, of course. But generally, when we start off, we look around, don't we, and go up the street and down the street. He's at 85, he's at 75. Do you know what? If I'm at 80, I'm not the worst, I'm not the best, and you're in the comfort zone. But of course, you don't know their cost base, so don't know whether either of them are making the money at 75 or 85, and you've stuck yourself in the middle. So that's, I think, what I was getting at in terms of a bit of business training is if you had that knowledge before you jump out on your own and you've kind of got that under control, your journey is going to be a bit smoother in terms of treating it like a business rather than, like you say, we're great at solving problems and fixing stuff, and so we get going and think it's all about fixing car, but actually the aspect of running a garage is more about running a business than it is about fixing cars. So the skill that we've got doesn't necessarily translate naturally into business. So it's a really interesting one. Yeah, no, good sage advice there for people who are thinking about starting up on their own. Right, we're coming to the point in the proceedings where I'm going to come round and solicit you for your magic wishes, because much as you believe it, we've been going for a good time now. So I'm going to come round and ask you if you could change anything at all in the industry. And again, nothing off limits. What would be your wish for making things better? So that could be anything, personal passions. And because we've got a magic wand, we have to go down as well as up. So you can have two wishes if you want to. You can have an up swoop and a down swoop. So what would it be if you had a magic wand? And this could be to do with the governance. It could be to do with clients and car technology, the way garages work, people, businesses, stuff, tools, diagnostic, whatever. It floats your boats. Could be issues that you've got or something that really rankles you. If you had your choice of magic wishes to make it better, what sort of things would that be? So I'm going to come to Mark again first because he's in the hot seat. Mark, what do you think? What would you be your magic wish? What would you change if you had?
I think a real strong governing body.
Whoop, yeah. So
that we've got some clarity of this trade needs to be governed and licensed. That would be my biggest wish.
Yeah, it's a really good one, isn't it? Licensing because it sets a standard by which everyone has to comply with.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, so the bottom feeders, I think those maybe give us a bad name, who are down at the other end of the scale, potentially could be managed out of the trade or not approved to trade. Yeah. Oh, that's really nifty. Have you got an up swoop? Have you got another wish, or is licensing doing it for you?
I think licensing is I think it's the biggest thing that we need. I think that would then drive up the customers' sort of their expectation and their what they think of us. It's everybody thinks this job's easy, but it's really not.
Far from it, yeah. It is far from it. Yeah, I think licensing would indeed raise the standard, and I think it would probably raise people that achieve that licensing standard. You guys are a bit unique because you've reached the pinnacle in terms of the technical level with the Master Technician. So you're into the standard and you know what that means to meet and comply. And I think if the trade had an operating standard run by somebody, there are many organisations out there that are catering for in inverted commas, the management of the industry outward to the public and upward to the government. One of those needs to grasp the nettle and really push for it.
For sure.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think somebody somewhere, and it's always somebody's job, isn't it? I suppose it comes down to a little bit to government will, whether they could take licensing on. I think what we're doing with the Master Technician, what you've done with your TechSafe, with your ADAS and with your EV, you're joining, I suppose, the embryonic list of approved garages in a way that you've reached that standard. I think the body that look after that, the IMI, have to build a critical mass of garages that are, in inverted commas, up to the standard, because if the government said, let's switch it tomorrow, if you haven't got this standard, you can't practice car repair, what would happen to everyone's car? So I think the IMI are building that pool of garages that are up to that standard with TechSafe. And so they have to, I suppose, present the government with an alternate network of garages before they can switch it over. Because if they said, well, we're having licensing from January the 1st, 2026, you can bet your bottom dollar that there will be a load of garages December the 31st looking to take the exam, because they're not really into, would leave it to the last minute. Look at MOT renewals and stuff, you have to have it done by a set date. So I think the IMI are probably in that zone of having built a network with TechSafe, but we'd like probably to see more action. It's been going on for a long time now, and it doesn't seem to be, for me, witnessing all of the stuff that I hear about. I don't see licensing as being a closer prospect. I probably haven't heard licensing apart from talking amongst ourselves at this level. I hear it in every conversation. I don't see it in the policy watch. I don't see it in the magazines. I don't see anyone banging the drum apart from us at this level. So yeah, I agree. Somebody somewhere needs to get behind it and push it on, because we all want it. The members of the trade want it.
I think the members of the public want it as well, but they don't realise that it's, you're saying about no one's banging the drum on it. They are every day, but not realising why the problems are there. Why they're taking it to a garage and it's having this part and this part put on it, and it's because there's no standard there. Yeah. So I think they would want it, just don't necessarily know that that's what it is that they want.
It's an interesting point then. So if you drew a line down the middle of the piece of paper and you said, at this side we got our garages and they're internal people, they're in the trade, and here you got your clients, but they're external. So these guys want it externally because they want the garages to be more reliable. People inside the trade also want it. So what's the blocker? What's the line then? Who is on the line stopping both parties getting what they want?
Interesting. That.
Got to be the grown-ups, isn't it? It's got to be the clowns who are currently in charge of the circus, and that's part of what I think the governing body's role is to break down that barrier and that middle line that is somebody somewhere. The IMI aren't shouting about it loud enough, I don't think. No. There's not a cohesive connection to clients, customers that drive cars to go, we're all driving for licensing. Do you support it? Can you write to your MP and get him to push it on? The coordination, I think, is part of the IMI's role in terms of driving the standard up. So, yeah, we need somebody to break that barrier down, because both bits involved with the industry want it, all the good people and all the good clients. So, I think you've definitely, we need to pressure our representatives.
From the clients that I speak to about that issue, they're all shocked that there is no licensing. There's no, there's nothing in place.
Nope.
Anyone can just go and open a garage up or work on a car, and I
think especially with electric vehicles, that's been an eye opener to them. There's no, I mean, that you say there is a qualification, but it's not mandatory.
No.
And when they look at what's involved in household electrics, you do have to get involved in that, and they can't see, the difference. And we can't either. So don't ask.
No, but it's true. You could be a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker yesterday, and tomorrow you can run a garage.
Yeah.
So servicing, maintenance. I know there's some research done on consumers about what they thought was, and most of them thought there was a license that you had to have skills and had to be assessed to be a garage or to be a mechanic in a garage. So, that's the kind of stuff that whoever's coordinating this need to take upstairs. I suppose in a way, if the government were to be put on the spot and say, why won't you invoke licensing into garages? They said, well, there's not enough problems. No, not enough people are dying. There's not a big enough issue for us to get involved with it. We've got other concerns, and it's a professional standard thing. I think some of the electrical and gas accredited schemes came about because of harm and injury, and maybe that's it. The frequency of damage to the outside world isn't great enough to make it warrant. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just supposing here that there aren't enough problems for it to be on the government's agenda. Plus, of course, all of the relevant governments have got their own disasters to manage, haven't they? The latest crisis with people taking backhanders and bungs, and it's just, I think they get so tied up with their own mess that some of the stuff that maybe needs legislating is so far down the list. They're trying to keep their jobs for the next 4 years. They're not really thinking about the big picture. So that could be some of it. But I don't know. Frustrating that we all want it and it's not happening, and it hasn't happened for however long.
Forever.
Forever. So no, I'm supporting that big swoosh. I think that's awesome one. Thanks, Mark. Michael, what do you reckon?
I think, Mark, you're 100% right. Legislation to have standards, but I think as it's so far away, I think as independent garage owners, if we collectively raise our standards, you've only got to look at the MOT scheme, and you can drive past one MOT station and it looks really clean and tidy, and you go past another one and think, oh dear, because it's not policed properly. So I think it's up to us as independent garage owners to raise those standards. And I would outwardly say that I would support anybody and help anybody. And there's some networks out there that if you're scared of joining that are all aligned to raising standards. The Blend is one we've just been to recently. Don't be scared of joining. It's open to everybody. So if you're an independent garage owner and you feel that you want to raise a standard, then collectively we can bring those standards up. But yeah, you're 100% right. It feels like it's too far away. But if we can demonstrate to the public that we are better and we are more qualified, and we do take things like qualifications and approvals and things like that more seriously, we can all raise our standard, and then the consumer can make the choice then. So.
Yeah, giving them a clear differentiator. I think the only one thing I would say, I agree what you say, joining the groups that are out there that are raising the standard is an awesome thing. It can help change your perspective. Those voices can gather together and influence people like the IMI and government. So that is awesome. I think I'm sort of skeptical about schemes and approvals. So the approved garage scheme, the good garage scheme, the better garage scheme.
Oh, I know that. Yeah,
so the only danger is with these informal ones is you've got 96 different approvals from 28 different companies, and you're part of this repair alliance or this approved scheme. What's a good scheme and what's not a good scheme? And I think that's where that central one scheme for everything. I don't know what it is, but that. Because you look at some places and they got approvals and you're going...
Well, no, because they're selling product, aren't they? So we'll give you this banner that you're a good garage or a green tick on above your door and bits and pieces. That's trying to change public perception, and there's no real value in that. I mean, we don't align to any of them other than the official channels with, representative bodies, the IGA and... the IAAF and bits and pieces where they're not trying to sell you anything. So that is a genuine industry standard. IMI qualifications, again, industry standards. So I know what you're saying. There's so many of them out there. How do the public identify which one's good and which one's bad?
It's the only challenge for the informal ones. No, cool stuff. But no, you're right. It's all our responsibility to lift the standard. And again, I'm preaching to the choir with you guys here in the room that are doing that in spades with your accreditation, particularly in this instance while we're together, is demonstrating that you're all happy with that standard setting and that you're checking against that you're still at that level. And that's really what I think goes to support a centralised, as Mark said, the licensing scheme. It's kind of all in place. If somebody could get behind it, raise it, charge us all 50 quid a month to be part of it, it would fund itself. And if you're no good and you can't reach the standard, you're not in, and make that mandatory, but gear insurance around it. You can't get insurance if you're not in that, because you're not operating at the standard, and you potentially a higher risk. So I think, yeah, most of the pieces are in place, aren't they? I think there's probably just a lack of will or determination, not from internally, but whoever. I don't know. It's nobody, isn't it? So, yeah. Somebody needs to do much better. but
and then there's a price point, isn't there? Because the consumer will turn around and go, if it's a cheaper option, and they don't necessarily understand that the part's being fitted without a calibrated tool.
Nope. They assume that it's all the same. Yeah. Oh, good stuff. Thanks, Mick. Josh, what do you reckon? Where's your magic wand being waved and wiggled?
I mean, maybe not a wish, but just a advice sort of thing on maybe looking a bit further afield on the way you do things. There is lots of other industries out there that may be doing something better. From personal experience from myself in training and stuff like that, look at something like the medical field. They've done it for they know how to get a lot of information in a certain time frame, and you'll know, like spaced repetition and stuff like that. It working smarter in that respect, and there's a lot of fields out there that you can definitely learn from. Don't just be in your bubble of this is the way it's always been done, I'll do it this way. True enough. I think looking for inspiration into other fields is really where we can help, bring each other on, isn't it? I think that's the difference between an open and a closed mindset. A closed mindset focuses in on the way it's always been done, whereas an open mindset looks at others and can learn from other experiences. And I think some of what we got going on in the group that you guys are in is that kind of sharing and that open mindset to accept others, experience or advice, that you're not closed mindset because you're here. In a way, you've got that open mindset, but trying to get that across to others, maybe in looking outside for solutions. It's very true. And we can look at other industries, we can look at best practices in other garages, and kind of what goes on with you guys about jobs and repairs and, the situations you've got going on. I think sharing that, and we can learn from others' mistakes in a way, or where people didn't quite get it so right, or where somebody's smashing it, you can kind of replicate what they're doing. So that sharing of best practice has got to be the way that we lift the standard. Yeah, true. Very good. Yeah. So, maybe looking outside. Yeah, I know one that's geared into kind of the way that college lecturers should be doing their CPD. So they should come outside of the college and drop into a repair business and see industry. So I think that should be part of the CPD thing, that we should all go and experience something a bit different, to go and learn something out of left field. It's a really good shout. Our CPD's geared around the stuff we already know, but there should be some brownie points for going completely out of left field and getting stuck into something. Yeah, that's really good. Good one. Mike, where's your magic wand going?
I think it's like the industry standard thing has been said already, but like customer perception, especially with some of these big problems, like AdBlue, they're driving a bit of a time bomb that's going to go wrong, and you're the person giving them all that bad news about something they didn't know about, and suddenly you're like the nasty man, aren't you?
Yeah, you're delivering the bad news.
We're not. I think the perception of us as a trade is very low, possibly in the public. They don't want to really give us £1,000 to fix that thing they don't know about. But if they got a new front door put on a house for £1,000, they see it every day and looks nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If they had to put an exhaust treatment system on the top of their chimney, they'd
Yeah, true. Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? You know, who's going to be responsible for that? Should it be part of the driving test? That in Germany they used to, as part of the driving test. I was watching Antiques Roadshow, one of my kind of out of left field. I watch all this random stuff. Anyway, some guy bought a car from Dusseldorf, and it was a little like an exploded version of a car with no body on it, but all the moving parts were in there. And they said, well, what on earth happened here? He said, well, in Germany, you used to have to understand how the car worked as part of your getting your driving license, because maintaining that motor vehicle involved a certain up level of skill, and you had to know what the clutch did and what a fan belt was and what the alternator was, because it gave you a very good passage into motoring ownership. And I think maybe that's somewhere that we can, how do you educate the consumer about their vehicle if the person selling it isn't doing it and the person buying it isn't doing it, and it's left to the garage to pick up the pieces?
You never see it in the handbook, do you?
No.
I think there's a big customer perception about what their
Well, I mean, look at
on their car
under shields and it's all there, really hiding all of it now, isn't it? Underneath the car is a big plastic tray, and on top is a big plastic tray.
We don't want you looking or touching.
Yeah, the magic goes on in under there, but it's an interesting. I don't know. From a garage perspective, maybe what we can do is a bit like, we see owners clubs doing it, and people that have got a proportion of different knowledge levels in their client base running open evenings in car maintenance, and how you change a tyre and how you do the thing. Maybe it's down, as Mick said about upping the standard, maybe it's down to us to educate, but who's going to come out on a wet Wednesday evening to learn about our blue systems, in a way. How do we do it? Maybe that is newsletters. Maybe we've got a responsibility to our existing client base in our newsletter to put some of this stuff out there before they need it. We should be communicating with our clients. We've had a run of these AdBlue faults. How do you know you've got AdBlue fitted to your car? What things do you need to do to maintain it and look after it carefully? What can happen when it goes wrong? And whether they're some of that will sink in. I think if we're communicating that proactively, maybe that's a way of communicating with our clients. Making them aware, have you got a diesel that's after 2016? If you have, it's likely you're going to have this potential issue. So maybe we grasp on that a little bit and proactively comms that. I don't know. Depends on how good we are with our communication. But going back to what you opened up with, really about that communication skill, maybe that's something we should be doing. The motoring organisations, don't know what the RAC or the AA's position is in informing their members about this kind of stuff. With their breakdown cover, do you get a pamphlet of stuff you need to watch? No, I know. But
it's not in the handbook, is it? No. It's nowhere. It's almost a hidden thing.
It is.
And people buy cars because of the colours and shapes and
the interior,
things like that,
and the radio.
And buying a BMW, did you know it had a Renault engine in it? They just don't see that, do they? No. They're buying a BMW.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it is difficult, but maybe we've got a job to do there. Yeah, a bit more homework. Inform your clients before they need to know it, that they need to know it. No, that's cool. Dan, what do you reckon? Where's your magic wand waving?
Well, I think there is definitely a worrying trend of people leaving the trade and not enough entering, and then the schools not doing enough to encourage or have an understanding of the complexity of the motor industry in general. It just tends to be not the brightest kids being pushed towards the trade rather than, it's not encouraged at all.
No.
It's only the ones that got a passion and inquisitive about it that are joining. So,
but more leave than.
Yeah, but is that the employers or the perception of the trade? Are we doing enough for those guys to get them trained and up to a standard where we can give them reward for what they're doing in those early years?
They got a problem of, this is potentially a kid that didn't like a lot of homework and didn't like a lot of work, extra work, has now been shoved into an industry where it is all homework and all extra work, and expecting them to change based on that. It's it's tricky to persuade them, you know.
It is. Now, it's really interesting. If we take that full circle and we go, actually, your client that drives a car that doesn't know about AdBlue is a teacher.
Yeah.
And they're advising kids on careers.
Yeah.
And they don't know the basic stuff about cars or garages. Their experience of a garage is I wanted 2,000 quid for this warning light that came on. And I was affronted personally. It was a big surprise. And I think the garage is a rip-off. You know, the negativity, those, you know, boys, gentlemen and ladies that are involved with careers advice are also unaware car owners and drivers that are advising the wrong people into the industry. And you could say, you know, there's a body of movement, the School of Thought, which is we met a guy called Dave Reese at the School of Thought at the trade event in Farnborough, and what they're trying to do is change that impression of the motor industry in schools, to encourage garages and businesses into schools to start to talk about the positivity that's in the trade: software, programming, coding, e-promming, electronics, you know, diagnostics, thought processes. There's a whole heap of really interesting stuff that your careers teacher that doesn't know their car's got AdBlue that's informing the wrong kids about the trade. Probably we're something to do with going in and sharing actually the positive aspects of it. And I would encourage you all to have a quick look at the School of Thought to see if there's something you might be able to do. They're always looking for somebody to give up a bit of time to go and talk the good talk, or to say the good messages to kids, to try and encourage, you know, the good recruits and youngsters coming in, because it is a huge problem, Dan. You know, not only is there a lack of people, good people coming in, there's kind of a lack of anyone coming in. So, but I think that's partly we need to get into the messaging down at that level, because I'm sure mums and dads, again, that don't know about AdBlue on their car are also advising kids about careers. And if they're not aware, or they don't have a positive relationship with the garage, it's not going to be in their list of things to do. We could all agree that the garage has given us a very good live-in and a very good life and a very good way of, you know, carrying on and being satisfied in your job and having a career path, all the things that you would hope that maybe you wouldn't have in some of the other careers that they're being advised to go in, because on the surface those careers look awesome, but they're not in comparison to what a career in the motor industry could do. And I think we're probably able to help influence that if we can help, you know, Dave and his mission to inform schools and colleges about the career potential. I know we've spoken to Liv about her experience being, she's the one, you know, I'm nearest to that's had that secondary school experience, and actually apprenticeships probably wasn't on the agenda necessarily. They're being shepherded towards education, A-levels and university as a path. Almost nobody's been recommended for the vocational route, because that's the system, and that's something that we probably need to change. You know, the apprenticeship gives you an awesome way to learn as you earn, and you're coming out of your apprenticeship with no student debt, with a head full of knowledge, geared up towards a career. It's springboarding you into the next phase of your life. Whereas if you go to uni, you're out of the loop, you're in this bubble of education, and you're spending those 3 years learning stuff. You're becoming an expert, you're knowing more and more about less and less, because you've zoned in on something. You come out with your politics degree and you get a job that doesn't even require that level of knowledge and understanding. So you've done training and education in a subject you're not using every day. Boo, head is blown. What a crazy way. What a system that we've got going on. And I think the School of Thought's process is about highlighting and demonstrating the potential career paths to young individuals to encourage them into the trade. So, you know, you've got your wand is well pointed there, Dan, absolutely. So, but again, maybe something we can help fix. I know that the guys at the IMI are behind that scheme, you know, helping resource websites and other things, trying to point people into directions that are looking at a trade, motor industry career. So that's really good. Listen, chaps, we're coming towards the end of our time together. I'd like to give you heartfelt thanks for giving up your evening after a really tough day at being beaten up on assessments. Really appreciate it.
It is 9:15.
It is, I know, yeah. And that clock isn't fast or slow, that is the time. So I really do appreciate your time. We've been gassing for a bit there. We covered some good ground, and I'd really like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your input there, for your views and perspectives. Again, getting the voice from our voice out there to the wider industry is the mission here, and sharing our views and the views, you know, if we can get this kind of conversation going with more and more people, it can only serve to inform and demystify and really set the way we feel, right, and for people to know that we are a bunch of professionals trying to do the right thing with passion. So I'd like to thank you all sincerely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you too.
Thanks, chat.